Good afternoon. Would members of the Planning and Growth Management Committee please report to Committee Room 1 for quorum?
Okay, so if I can get some order in the room. Hello, good afternoon. So I'm going to try again. Wow, that works. That works. Power of the gavel. Welcome back. We will start the afternoon session. We have now item number 31.7. We have quite a number of public speakers on that. I spoke before lunch as to what we're doing because we are continuing the meeting of this morning, of last month, and we started it this morning. So we're here to hear from the public. Please, maximum of 5 minutes per speaker. If you speak for less, we don't mind. But if you have something important to say, we definitely do want to hear from you. If someone else has emphasized it and you can tell us you're supporting what they've said as well, that's also great because we do have a lengthy list of speakers. Please watch the clock so I don't have to remind people of the 5 minutes, and try to stay on the topic that's in front of us. And if there are questions after, my colleagues will pose them to you. And with that, Bob Murphy. You look all ready? You got your 5 minutes.
There was a wide preference for option 4, which I now understand to be option 3, on June 21st, but that support was qualified. Where Midtown in focus is problematic, is where it normalizes extremes. It is hard to see that these revisions will serve as anything more than a holding bylaw. The larger question is the repeal of the growth plan. Our challenge today is to show the new Premier that we can do without cap and trade and without carbon taxes and still reduce gridlock and emissions by using the device of the growth plan to promote growth in underutilized areas, to balance demands on infrastructure and transportation, instead of using the device of the growth plan to exacerbate gridlock. We know, those of us in the North End, what Roehampton and Broadway and Erskine are like on weekday mornings. What are the effects of the growth plan on air quality? We need to persuade the Premier killing the growth plan is in the public interest. We need a report on what the growth plan will cost the property taxpayers of the City of Toronto. Should the needs of other areas be subordinated to a growth plan that should never have been there? Section 3.5 of the Planning Act instructs Council and the OMB that they are to conform to the growth plan. Section 2I of the Planning Act instructs Council and the OMB they are to ensure there are sufficient educational, recreational, social services. This unfunded plan is not what is contemplated in 2I of the Planning Act. So what do we do where the Planning Act contradicts itself? This is really not a matter for the OMB. It is only a decision the minister can make. The difference between our official plan and the growth plan is that the OP went through a wide public process, the growth plan did not. A report setting out the problematic aspects of the growth plan and the potential positive uses of the device of the growth plan would support a resolution from City Council that the province repeal the Young Eglinton Provincial Growth Plan. Alternatively, that a report on the consequences of the growth plan be appended with this plan when it is sent to the minister. I appreciate how difficult this has been for the planners, given what they have been given by provincial law and regulation. Planning through the looking glass could not have been hard. Easy. Thank you.
Sorry, thank you. Are there questions of the deputy? So I have one, because I represent Willowdale. So how do you call this the north end of the city?
You are actually Midtown for North York. That's pre-amalgamation.
Okay, I'll take that, thank you. Then thank you for being to the point, Mr. Murphy.
Thank you.
The next speaker I have is Dorian Nadovsky, and then Renee Sylvester. And did I get that close to being right? Perfect. Wow, okay.
Good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before this committee. My name is Dorian Nadovsky, and I'm here today to support option 3. I spent the first 20 years of my life in the Yonge and Eglinton area. I went to Eglinton Public School. I was part of the last class to graduate from North Toronto Collegiate Institute. My childhood was spent walking every street, every park, and every alley in my neighborhood, in our neighborhood. It was a great place to grow up. We had an incredible amount of freedom and the space to put it to good use. Someone far more clever than me once said that the only constant in the world is change. Change is inevitable. And Toronto has seen dramatic change over the last 10 years. Neighborhoods across the city are developing. They are growing, and that's a good thing. Except when it's not. Except when it's too much. At Yonge and Eglinton, the pace of development has been far greater than in any other neighborhood. I am here to ask for some moderation, and that's what option 3 represents. When I take the TTC to visit my mother, who still lives in the area, an overcrowded subway delivers me to an overcrowded station, and I emerge into the massive, sprawling construction site that is Yonge and Eglinton. When I walk up Yonge to Roehampton through clouds of dust, excessive noise, and hundreds of people, it is clear that it's not the place in which I grew up. It's also clear that it has, quite frankly, become unlivable. Years ago, my mother moved into this neighborhood to start a better life. I have moved away to do the same. The never-ending construction and the resulting impacts on human health and livability make it difficult to spend a single day in the area, let alone live there full-time. And I fear that the worst is yet to come, when we have to live with the finished product of this chaotic construction. The rows of massive condos will have taken over and overwhelmed the community, especially along Eglinton, Roehampton, and Broadway. What kind of streetscape, what sense of community will remain? What about green space? What sort of childhood will the next generation have? The soon-to-be-completed LRT is a necessary addition to Toronto's transit. It is long overdue, and it's going to compound the challenges of this neighborhood. Our neighborhood is already on the brink, and the LRT will drop tens of thousands of additional people into it each and every day. This, coupled with the explosion in population, will strain infrastructure to a breaking point. Thousands of new residential units are being built, and we have not come close to addressing the infrastructure deficit. We are playing catch-up. Councillors, thousands of people live here now. Thousands of people who deserve a livable neighborhood. Thousands of people who deserve a voice. Option 3 is a good first step. Reducing the height of the planned new builds will help alleviate some of the pressures. We have a lot more work ahead of us. The plan, as it stands now, contains no new green space for our neighborhood. A Immediate action must be taken to address diminishing livability by government and by the developers themselves. The developers have been winning these battles for years. It's time for neighborhoods to get a win. It's about the people that live in the neighborhood and the effect this whole situation is having on their lives. It's about trying to find a path to a better future. Councilors, I hope we can take an important first step together. I am asking you to vote for option 3. It is the right choice. Thank you.
Thank you. There's questions for you. Councillor Robinson.
Thank you very much for being here today and for your remarks. You started off the top by saying you're actually not opposed to development. You understand the city has to develop.
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. But what I think I heard you say is that this area of Toronto has exceeded the growth targets over and over again and become unlivable.
Yeah. Year over year, and it's a huge burden on the residents that already live there, that already call it a home. I called it a home for 20 years. And the amount of change we've seen, some good, has been great, but it's happening at a breakneck speed that I don't think is fair to the people that live there or fair to the people that will live there.
Okay, and you talked about the schools, growing up in the neighborhood and the schools. Are you aware in the report, option 3 will actually have, will also have significantly reduced the shadow impacts on North Toronto Collegiate and Eglinton Junior, you know well, the Eglinton Junior School, the open space.
Yeah.
This is one of the great points, I think, of option 3 is that it'll reduce the shadow impact, which would have left these important educational institutions in dark, will be reduced significantly. Are you aware of that? And what do you think are the positives of that?
Well, absolutely. I mean, I grew up, I was in those schoolyards with sun all day, every day. It was a great place to go to school as an elementary student and as a high school student. And it'd be a shame and detrimental if the shadow impacts of the other options are allowed to go and impact day-to-day life of the youth and children in the area.
Also, it would reduce option 3, the requirements for school and childcare spaces, which again is problematic in the neighborhood.
With more young families moving in, how could you reduce those spaces? That makes no sense, right?
And you also talked about, which I thought was interesting, being a younger person, transit, and your challenges with the line 1 and the lack of transit. And can you talk a little bit more about the transit challenges in that neighborhood?
Absolutely. Well, right now it's one of the worst parts of my week to travel up to Eglinton Station from downtown, and I mean, no matter what time of day it seems, it's always overcrowded and never a good experience. And I mean, with the LRT incoming, which I'm excited for, it's only going to exacerbate those challenges tenfold, 20-fold, 30-fold. It's going to be even worse, and we do not have, I guess, an adequate plan to deal with that, and then that's going to be a huge challenge. So that's why option 3 is a far better option, because it will help alleviate some of the pressures, and we still have to work on this quite a bit, but it's a good first step, as I said in my remarks.
I'll just finish by asking you, I know some of your family members have reached out to me by email talking about the kind of the impacts of what's happened in Yonge and Eglinton, the kind of Wild West approach to development over the last series of years, and just talked about health impacts. Can you address that or share that with us?
I mean, how many construction sites are there in the area? 10, 15? It's crazy. They start at 7 a.m., they'll go to 7 p.m., sometimes later. Making constant noise. It's very difficult to have a good night's sleep in the area. That impacts health immediately. The dust clouds kind of brought up from the sites. I mean, my family lives on the 8th floor of one of the Roehampton buildings, and it definitely affects your day-to-day life there. You can't really spend much time on the balcony. You can't really enjoy your residence in your home, and that's a massive issue. And I mean, it's a massive burden on the families there right now, and it will be a massive burden on the families to come. So I mean, we have to do something about it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? The deputy by committee members? Not seeing any. Thank you for coming. Now it's Renee Sylvester Williams, then Avner Mandelman.
Good afternoon, councillors. There we go. Thank you for your time. My name is Renee Sylvester Williams, and I live on 7 Broadway, and I've lived in Midtown for about 15 years. I want to tell you what I saw in Canada Day. So I was walking on Broadway Avenue, where I live, with a friend after dinner. It was late afternoon. As we walked past the track and field at North Toronto Collegiate, I saw families playing with their young children. A couple teenagers were taking photos, I'm assuming for their Instagram or Snapchat. And seniors were getting their exercise around the track, and there was a guy sleeping on the turf. It was hot, I don't blame him. This is the only green space in the area, and mind you, it is artificial green space in the immediate neighborhood. I saw parents with strollers watching their kids run around the parking lot at St. Monica's Church, that's right opposite the school, because there is no green space in the neighborhood. Instead, there are plans to put 40-story, 50-story, and 60-something condos on these 3 streets. Now, the planners do promise a Park Street loop. They've said that. But based on that plan, residents may not be able to walk on that loop for what, a decade or 2? Some of the residents won't be around. I can't promise I'll be around to walk on that loop. So I come here to advocate for option 3, known as option 4 originally. It's the only option that actually takes into consideration the city's mandate on what makes a livable neighborhood. It is also the plan that is most consistent with the growth plan and the provincial policy statement. It supports a livable community as defined by the city. So I ask you to vote for it. It is, I think, a reasonable compromise between the residents and the planners, and it takes into consideration livability and actually employment. And the people who are invested in this neighborhood and in the city, they live there and they want to live and they deserve to live in a neighborhood. Not just a sequel to City Place, guys, come on. All right, let's learn from previous planning mistakes and make a neighborhood livable and take that into consideration. Also, I just want to address the dust thing. I have to dust twice a week and I hate household chores. I just want to bring that up. All right, thank you all very much. Yes, exactly. Any questions?
Sorry. The last comment was what?
I have to, there is so much dust in that neighborhood. I have to dust twice a week, and I hate household chores. I do it. I own a place, obviously, and I don't want to live in filth. So much dust, so much dust.
Thank you. Councillor Robinson, you had questions?
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Some people in the neighborhood have called it a density dump.
Yes.
On the 3 streets, one of which you live on.
Yeah.
Roehampton, Broadway, and Eglinton, and maybe even Erskine to some extent. I see some people here from Erskine today. I just want to ask you, I don't know how to do this tactfully, but is there any kind of social piece to this? Like does it, you know, this is an apartment neighborhood partially. Is there a social piece to this to make it livable and a nicer place for people to
Well,
call a neighborhood?
Well, I think people want it to be a neighborhood because like I said before, on Canada Day, it was late evening, so the sun wasn't as blisteringly hot as it had been, and people were out, right? You know, the sidewalks were filled with people, and they were on the track and field, like I said, chilling out, walking. That guy was napping. So there is, I believe there's this fundamental desire for green space, for a good-sized park for people to live in. And there's nothing really there to suggest that we are going to get anytime soon, not in the next decade or 2, a space where people can take their children. And these are not, apart from the teenagers, most of these children were in strollers, right? They're walking around, kind of toddling, some running crazily. They're all like mostly under 10. So it's a fairly young neighborhood. And there aren't the amenities that people who have been there for 30 years or people who have just moved in the last 5 years have. You know, I can't tell you how many times I have left my building, even today, and there was a Tim Hortons truck on my street because there's a Tim Hortons on the corner. And there was a truck, I'm presuming, that might be there to restock a couple of the restaurants or shoppers. And Broadway's not a wide street, and these trucks were there, parked on the street.
Okay. Just back to the official, the growth plan and option 3, it completely conforms to the growth plan, correct?
As far as to my understanding, yes.
So the staff have put it forward as an option because they're saying it's consistent with the provincial policy
Yes.
statement.
Yes.
Okay, and you're a supporter of trying to get more employment in the area because that's lacking as well?
Yes, I believe so. I mean, it's a great neighborhood. I don't blame people who want to come and live there. But if you're going to create a neighborhood where you want people to be, you have to give them other reasons to come there, right? Yes, you can put your head down at night once the construction noise has died down, but you also need more reason like office jobs.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Not seeing any. Thank you for coming. I wish you could train my kids to dust twice a week. I have Avne Mandelbaum.
With your permission, Mr. Chair, my name's Terry O'Sullivan. I'm on the second page, and because of scheduling conflict that I have, Mr. Mandelman's agreed to switch places with me, subject to you being okay with that.
Subject to the committee being okay. Committee being okay to switch places, all in favor, opposed, carried?
Through you to the committee.
No problem, so
Thank you very much.
you're Mr. O'Sullivan, and
I appreciate
Avner
the
wants to go
indulgence.
down in your spot. And I have Maria Ayunu, and then Harry Verholtz after. Terrence, please go ahead.
Thank you very much, sir. My name's Terry O'Sullivan. I live at 70 Roehampton, but I have been in the neighborhood or adjacent to it for 35 years now. The province designated this area in 2006 as an urban growth area with a density objective then of 400 people, jobs, and jobs per hectare. Today it is over 600 people, jobs per hectare, an increase of more than 50% from that objective in 2006. Now, people will say, and I've heard people say at the OMB, that's just a minimum density. To them, I say, give your head a shake. This is, what is it, 1,000, 2,000, 5,000, 10,000? Where are you going with it? And it is time now to sit and recognize, look at and recognize the effect of the density that is already there. This is not an anti-development, anti-business presentation on my part or on the part of any of the people I know who are here, and I don't know everybody, but I know a number of them. We believe in that. We believe that option 3, which I support for the reasons articulated by the people who spoke before me, is still a developer-friendly report. But here are just a few of the problems that, in my view, will be exacerbated in our neighborhood by increased development that exceeds option 3. First of all, it is unsafe. It is unsafe for the disabled who can't manage the streets, the sidewalks because of the traffic and the crowding, and their wheelchairs and scooters. The sidewalk in front of our building in Roehampton does not allow 2 scooters to pass. Does not allow people in wheelchairs to get by each other. There are often trucks parked on top of the sidewalks making deliveries to the construction sites. The disabled cannot handle the community in its present state. Secondly, it is unsafe for the elderly, a number of whom still live in their homes, not in the high-rises, some in the high-rises, who have trouble navigating the rough and broken streets. I come downtown every day on the subway, and I see people in their walkers trying to navigate broken pavement and the sidewalks and having to cross because something's blocked, having to go across the street because something is blocked due to the construction trucks going in and out of the sites. It is really unsafe for bicyclists. I defy anyone to ride on a regular basis on Eglinton, Roehampton, or Broadway. It's worth your life, literally, to do so. This city is presently, and properly so, focused on enhanced bicycle safety for its residents. There are no bike lanes in our neighborhood. There are no bike lanes in Eglinton, Roehampton, or Broadway. The streets are narrow. They're clogged with construction vehicles. Automobiles can hardly pass each other as a result. To put bicycles in the middle of that is to invite almost certain disaster. It's inevitable, perhaps, but it's also avoidable. And it's no answer to say that there is a fantasy of a green line or a ribbon of this or that around the neighborhood. There is no concrete plans for it. More importantly, there is no budget for it. Unless buildings are torn down or bought and parks created in that space which would cost tens of millions of dollars. It isn't going to happen. Finally, let me make this point, and echoing the second speaker. It is becoming an inhumane place to live. It is an area which has presently, or is presently infused with commercial and development values. It is losing its people values. There are no parks or green spaces. There are not enough schools. And in my view, the plans that are proposed in options 1 or 2 will turn the area into a ghetto of transient residents. It is a myth to think that families are going to raise their children or want to raise their children in these proposed high-rises without a school to go to or a place to play. These buildings will become the inner-city neglected buildings that have plagued many American cities in the past, and for just the same reasons. I urge you to read Jane Jacobs' The Life and Death of American Cities if you haven't read it already. Those who don't remember history are condemned to repeat it. Be not among those. Those are my submissions. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions of the deputant?
Don't mind. I don't think we've had the pleasure of meeting before, but
I don't believe so.
no, I don't believe so. But thank you for your dissertation today. You cited Jane Jacobs, which she was a big proponent of livable communities and neighborhoods. You're not saying, I'm not hearing you say, hey, we're NIMBYs. You're saying it's just been too much too fast. Is that your take on it?
No, if I was a NIMBY, I wouldn't have moved into the neighborhood or into the building I'm in, where I've been for the last 2 years. And the proposal in option 3 is not a NIMBY proposal. It isn't a shutdown proposal. It is a proposal to try to do things on a more human scale.
And would you say that we should repeat the mistakes of the OMB now that that is off our neck, I guess, in a sense? It's shifting dramatically with the reform, promised reform. Would you say we should repeat those mistakes, that the OMB has really set a precedent?
It's a ridiculous question.
Thank you.
No, the answer is no. I'm a lawyer. I have been to the OMB as a professional person, as a lawyer representing people, not in this case, not in anything doing with my neighborhood. And I've been there when they dealt with the building on Broadway that's going up adjacent to 25 Broadway. It's a hideous experience. I've never been to an adjudicative tribunal in 45 years as a trial lawyer that is more ridiculous, has less judicial values or adjudicative values than the OMB. It is a shit show. My apologies for the strong language, but I know I don't have much time.
Oh dear, I'll finish there.
So, as a solicitor and a professional opinion, how would you express those words at the hearing if you were there?
I think what was said on our behalf the last time by one of our colleagues was the OMB was supposed to be the bulwark between the interests of the development community, which are fair and recognized, and the interests of those in the community that are going to be affected by those development. That didn't happen. And I would say that it failed in its mandate to act as that bulwark, as the watchdog over the community and human values, and seemed to concern itself, in my experience, with whether things were just within the plan, just outside the plan, not so different from the next building down the road, in a series of ending exceptions to exceptions. Each exception begat another exception, and the dominoes fell. That was my experience at the OMB.
So the city is now, this committee at least, considering an option that is different than the staff option, which was in front of us. In doing that, much of the staff option was based, I think, on decisions that were made through settlements at the Ontario Municipal Board, which seems to be one of the reasons why they've recommended some of the heights and densities that were in their plan. As you said, things happened and they take an experience to it. And they stated that in their original report, and now they've also stated that the option 3, which is one being considered, I think my colleague's going to ask us to consider, would reduce the densities but still meet the official, the province's official growth plan. So being a person experienced at the board and as a solicitor, what's the type of, what explanation can we give now to try and talk about what might be considered here, as the staff have done it in their due diligence based on what decisions have been and the way that the area has grown out, but not from our own direction, from decisions, and dealing with something that is of a lower height and density in some areas than what their perspective was?
I think I'd answer that first, sir, by saying that you have a broader latitude and more tools in your toolbox in terms of your responsibilities than did the OMB. Where they failed in their mandate, in my view, to interject themselves into the process as protectors of the public, you as elected officials close to the public have that ability and facility. Nobody's saying don't develop. Nobody's saying stop. At least I'm not. But people are saying slow down, catch our breath, and let's exercise the common sense values for which you were all elected to exercise. I mean, it's your mandate now, and to decide what to do. It's within the plan. You have the ability to do it, and you will, I think, make your community that you all represent collectively a more human place to live if you do that.
So, and to the folks that are in the industry representing them, staff came out with recommendations and committee may not support those. So what is the words you would give to those persons?
Well, I would say that there is, to be perfectly crass about it, money to be made in option 3. It's not as high as you'd like. It won't be as much money, but nobody's going to build it and lose money on it. And so if you're worried about, it's about how much profit and how much density. It's not about no profit and no density. And so I'd say this is an adjustment. And it's been glory days for those folks over the last several years in the Yonge Eglinton corridor. And now I think it is time to say to them, look, we're coming back. Here's what we're going to do in this area in the near future. We're going to catch our breath. We may have a look at it in a few years. There is a nice blend here between the opportunity to profitably develop these sites and to make this a livable community where people will want to come and live in your buildings. When I'm old enough to remember Jane Jacobs, and when you talk about how the inner cities in America got hollowed out, the Buffaloes and the Detroits and the Philadelphias and so on at that time, they got hollowed out because nobody wanted to live there anymore. And the idea that people are going to come with families and set down roots and stay in that community without any infrastructure to support them is fantasy. It's just not going to happen. You wouldn't raise your kids there, neither would I. It's fantasy.
Thank you. Any other questions of the deputant? Not seeing any. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time, patience.
Maria Ayunu, and after that, Harry Berholtz, and then David Dumulin.
All my equipment is falling apart now.
Don't kill yourself. You have a minute. We are a patient group. Sometimes. No. I know it takes a moment to set that up. So first you have to accept our terms of service. Okay. You ready?
At number 25 Broadway. And I would just like to show you the current development plans in our immediate neighborhood, the two northeast blocks north of Yonge and Eglinton. These are already approved buildings that are in the process of being either built or planned for. This is number 5565 Broadway, went to the OMB. There's a proposed two 45-story towers on one site. They approved 39 stories. This is on Broadway across the street from 5565. It is 12 stories to be built in the current parking lot. This is 75 Broadway, a 40-story tower to be attached to an existing 10-story building. This is 85, 87, 89, and 91 Broadway, a proposed 34-story tower. This is 110, 114, 120 Broadway, 2 towers, 128 stories, 135 stories. This is 117, 127 Broadway, 2 towers, 34 and 35 stories. This is the current construction going on of Broadway and Redpath. Sorry, I think I'm a little backwards there. This is 117, 127. This is the current construction at the corner of Broadway and Redpath, 38-story building. This is 100 Broadway, a proposed 34-story tower. Just south of Broadway, on 808 Mount Pleasant, there is currently a hotel, the only one in the area, by the way. There is proposed a 44-story tower. Turning the corner at number 3941 Roehampton, there is a 48-story tower. Moving along on Roehampton, there is at 89 and 101, a 36-story tower is being attached to an existing building. This is the LRT, which we love and are in full support of. However, you can see that it's in full construction and the streets are in complete disruption mode. I think a number of people mentioned it. And this is while all the other building is going on in the neighborhood. This is 150 Eglinton East. Again, I'm just going along the 2 blocks that we've been talking about, the northeast quadrant. A 39-story tower is being proposed. This is the current building that is going on right at the corner of Yonge and Eglinton. It is a 58-story tower, and it is next to a 36-story tower. This is the intersection of Roehampton and Redpath. There are 2 towers across from each other, simultaneous construction, 38 and 34 stories. I think a number of people have mentioned the Toronto District School Board issue. These are the signs that have gone up saying they may not be able to accommodate the students. You may have already, the members of the council, the members of the committee may have received a letter from the North Toronto principal, William Mack, who said, and I quote him from his letter, Option 3 may also have an impact in reducing the tremendous impact on the existing infrastructure and will hopefully positively affect the massive and dangerous traffic and transit congestion in the area. A number of people have already mentioned that there are 2 and 3 bedroom family units being planned for the new towers, yet people won't be able to send their children to school there. This is just an example of the difficulty of the navigation that people have crossing the street and navigating the sidewalks that Terry spoke about earlier, trucks parking on sidewalks. Here's a group of people trying to make their way across along with a stroller and an older people in front. And here's our current reality. You've seen an example of what we're already dealing with. This is not taking into consideration any new potential buildings. Lots of construction. There are tight and closed walkways. But I think as a group, we're an optimistic bunch. We wouldn't be here if we didn't think we could work together to make our community more livable. We do see the light at the end of the tunnel. And we urge you to listen to the hundreds of residents who are pleading with you, many of whom are here today, to vote for option 3. Sorry, I've gone over my time.
So your time is up. Questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Robinson.
I'm really You obviously put a lot of time into pulling together this photo walkabout. I'm really grateful for that, and I guess I wish all councillors could come to these 3 streets and see what's happening there. If they did, if each councillor on this committee and city council walked through Erskine, Keewatin even, but more importantly, Roehampton and Broadway, what would their experience be? At a peak time day, Monday to Friday, what would their experience be like?
I think they would see exactly what we've been living through. We know these are already accepted buildings and they're starting to build. The construction is all happening at the same time, which is, I know it's another issue, but it is something that we're living with day to day. It's difficult to navigate the streets, and before one building is finished, another one has started. So just getting around the neighborhood is very difficult. I won't even go into driving, because driving is impossible because there are trucks blocking traffic all the time. So, but even just walking on the narrow sidewalks, I think one of us has already said that we're lucky that nobody has been killed. Actually, I think there have been a number of incidents already of people like having to walk on the street.
So safety is an issue. We've heard that from a couple. Also dust, construction trucks on sidewalks. Well, give us other examples.
Well, there are a lot of, mostly when the schools are in session, because there's North Toronto Collegiate, which is several thousand students there, I believe.
Yes, it's huge.
And the kids, I mean, have to walk on the street. If you have a bunch of teenagers, 4 or 5 of them.
I have to interrupt you.
Sure.
Because what's in front of us is the planning and the heights and densities, et cetera, of buildings. And I'm cognizant of the problems that you face there, but I don't really need a line of questioning any further as to what you currently experience with the dust. We've heard it, we know it, we see it in the pictures.
Okay,
There's a lot.
so I'll move on to another question. Thank you. You were part of the working group that worked diligently to come up with option to be presented at the community meeting that took place. And then planners worked on that further. They went up on a number of buildings. They went up higher. Do you see the option 4 that is now presented to this committee as option 3 as a compromise?
I see it as a very fine compromise, and it is a compromise, and it meets all the provincial requirements for growth that have already been exceeded, as we've all said, and it accommodates the same number of people and jobs. In the report that compares the 3 options, the residents and jobs per hectare in option 1, option 2, and option 3 vary very little. So we are asking for a crumb here and asking you to vote for option 3, because really the difference in heights is the only thing that matters here. The residents and jobs per hectare, those numbers are so close for each option, so it shouldn't make any difference.
Okay, thank you very much.
No other questions? Thank you very much. I have Harry Burholz, then David Damoulin. Is Harry here? I don't see Harry.
Obviously, I'm not Harry.
I noticed that.
Yes,
So,
my name is May Gardiner, and I request permission to read Mr. Burholtz's submission as he had to leave.
oh, okay, no problem.
Okay?
Your name again is?
May Gardiner?
Do the staff have that from you or not?
No, this was just,
When you're finished, would you just make sure they have it so they know who was in attendance?
Mr. Burholtz and I are both residents of 70 Roehampton Avenue. And this is his words. Over the last decade, the powers to be created a speeding train that is roaring down a track through our neighborhood, Yonge and Eglinton, and is creating massive overdevelopment. It has and will continue to diminish the quality of life for not only those of us who are already living in our neighborhood, but for the thousands who buy condos in our quadrant without knowing the chaos that is in store for them. 15 years ago, the province designated this area as a growth node. Looking back, it made sense to add a large number of residents to this area that was so well served by the Yonge subway. Their objective was to breathe life into this community. However, by 2016, the number of new residents had exceeded the original objective by more than 40%. Now, in 2018, the subway is bursting at its seams. The streets, sidewalks, and roads are often unmanageable. And now this unbridled development, instead of breathing life into our community, is choking life out of our community. As you walk our streets, Roehampton, Broadway, Erskine, Redpath, Eglinton, almost every development application has been approved or is asking you to approve thousands of more units, 40 stories, 50 stories, 60 stories. It truly feels like there's no limit to the height of Toronto developers. We are now, for the developers, insatiable desire to maximize profits at the expense of our neighborhood. We are now in uncharted waters, and the criteria for approving all this development appears to no longer have anything to do with creating a positive quality of life, dependable infrastructure, places to work and play, freedom from the fear of being run down at an intersection, public transit that lets you get to work on time, schools that are not overcrowded. If you don't approve option 3, Eglinton Avenue will end up being a massive wall of high-rise buildings. We are asking you to get onto that speeding train and courageously pull the cord that will have the development train move on to a different track that will take it to a new destination based on a more stable, healthier, safer, controllable, and livable vision of our community, a community that each of you personally would be proud to live in. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Thank you for reading his statement for us and coming. I then have David Dumoulin and Jerry Verholtz. Am I close, David?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and councillors. I am David Dumoulin. I am the president of the Condo Corporation at 900 Mount Pleasant Road. I am representing our community of 242 units and the related interests of all the owners and tenants. We are also here to support the efforts of our councillor Jay Robinson and other resident stakeholders in Ward 25, from whom you've already heard a good deal. We want each of you on this committee to know that option 3 is what we support as a neighborhood and as a community. It is our compromise with the planners and residents to help bring the developers onto the same team. We are here today seeking your support and your leadership to develop a plan with significantly reduced permitted heights and therefore reduced densities on Broadway, Roehampton, Redpath, and Eglinton. You have already heard that this area was already 40% over density when the plan was approved in 2016. That 40% is now closer to 50 or 60% over density, excuse me, as a consequence of the overdevelopment in the northeast quadrant of Yonge and Eglinton, an area already experiencing unprecedented density intensification. You've heard all the details. We can't do anything about the buildings that have been approved or are being built, but we are asking if you have considered how much more density can be absorbed on top of all of what exists. With the as yet unapproved applications which continue to be posted on our local streets, we are being overwhelmed daily, and we are truly fearful that the density will hit over 100% over acceptable limits without option 3. We are here to ask you, our elected representatives, how much more are you asking us to endure? We have already absorbed more than our fair share of development. The character and soul of our neighborhood is being sacrificed to feed insatiable development greed, plain and simple. We are certain there are other neighborhoods on the main transit lines in this city that would welcome and benefit from having some of this new proposed development being redirected their way. As you will hear, this rapid pace of development raises significant concerns for the neighborhood, including all the standard things you would expect as our elected stewards. The area's infrastructure capacity with special attention to transits, school, water, utility services, community centers, and daycares already are overwhelmed. A good example of our dilemma is the proposed development on the north side of Broadway at 110, 114, and 120. The application itself is misleading, as you heard somebody describing it a bit earlier. It claims that they are proposing 128 and 135-story tower. However, when you read the smaller type in the plan, application, these towers will be on top of 6-story podiums, and thus will bring the actual heights to 34 and 41 stories respectively, which would make them 22 stories higher than the adjacent 19-story building, much higher than they claim, and building a virtual wall for us to stare at. If it goes ahead with the current application, it will not only block out the sun, but literally will block out the sky because of the proposed height and mass. It will negatively impact property values and personal investments, which many owners is a key aspect of their investment portfolio, as well as the retirement funds for many seniors in our neighborhood. We are asking, why should the developers be allowed to profit at our expense or in their expense? Owners have made this their home for over 10 years, many longer. Why are these non-resident latecomers being favored over existing ratepayers? We want to emphasize we are not anti-development, and you've heard this before, and that is why we need to rely on you, our elected representatives, to recommend and approve option 3 to the full council. This is the only option that permits and manages additional growth, but not at the expense of existing owners. Where an adjacent building is 19 stories high, for example, we are only requesting that new buildings may not exceed the size of its immediate neighbors with appropriate setbacks front and side, but don't penalize us. We are simply requesting that new development be managed to fit in with existing heights, not be in excess of what is there now, as many of the new approved developments will do and tower over us. Option 3, limiting new buildings to
David,
20
I
and
need you to
15
sum up.
stories.
And I started your clock late anyways.
Pardon me?
I need you to sum up, and I did start your timing late.
Okay. The clock was late, I'm sorry. Okay. This vote, your vote, will have a pervasive and historical impact on our community. The vision, form, and fit of future development under option 3 will help to ensure the context-specific character of the neighborhood will be eroded no further. Thank you for consideration.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions?
Thank you,
Councillor
Mr. Chair.
Robinson.
Are rental units and buildings being replaced?
To the best of our knowledge, they are.
So beautiful, decent buildings are being pulled down just to go higher and higher and higher, rentals?
Precisely.
Okay, so that's a density issue. You talked a bit about shadow impacts and sky view, sunlight. What impact is the heights of these buildings having on on this neighborhood, the northeast quadrant?
Well, I can only give you a personal example. I live on the 16th floor of a high-rise. The building being proposed beside me, as I mentioned earlier, will be 22 stories higher than our own building and making it 25 stories higher than where I sit at 16, and as I said, creates a virtual wall. The whole west side of our building will have nothing to look at except a wall, which is only 25 meters away is a side setback. Hardly a look at the sky.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Jerry Verholz, then John Kaiser.
Good afternoon. I'm speaking today on behalf of the Republic Residents Association, as I am the chair of that association. Our association represents the people who reside at 25 Broadway, 70 Roehampton, and the staff and the students of North Toronto Collegiate Institute. You've already heard and will be hearing from many of our members, some of whom had to leave already. You're hearing from them what it's actually like to live on the ground in our community. I understand that several who couldn't make it today have sent scores of emails to you in support of option 3. Thank you for giving us this opportunity to be heard by you. We are also grateful to city planners for putting forward option 3, the option that was resoundingly endorsed at the large recent community consultation meeting, and the one we hope will earn your vote today. We formed the RRA 6 years ago to address the specific rising concerns about the eroding livability of our unique vertical community. We understood that the vibrant and dynamic neighborhood at Yonge and Eglinton that we chose to live in was situated in what the province called a growth node. We expected growth and even some growing pains. But it soon became alarmingly clear that development was running rampant in our area. Despite the RRA's active involvement in Midtown in Focus planning from day one, we stood by, helpless, as we witnessed one building after another being torn down and another mammoth tower, sometimes twice the height, being approved and constructed on that site. We came to understand that this happened predominantly because, in the past, the OMB often overrode Midtown in Focus's vision and city planner recommendations in favor of developers' ambitious schemes. Today, we are suffering the burden of this past unchecked development. Are we also to have future quality of life dictated by developers at the expense of the livability of our community? To be clear, as you've heard, our community are champions of sensible incremental growth. In fact, some people have called us YIMBYs. We say yes to development that is sensible and incremental. In recent years, we have worked successfully with some developers and city councillors to achieve results that have been acceptable to all parties. Councillors, for you, today is not business as usual. Today, the future of our entire neighborhood rests on your decision. The singularly important decision you're about to make will impact the lives of tens of thousands of people for decades to come. We are proposing that you vote for option 3. It represents a compromise between planners and residents that is both reasonable and pragmatic. Option 3 supports the well-being of all residents at Yonge and Eglinton in all 4 quadrants through reduced heights and density. In contrast, the other 2 options propose heights and density that will jeopardize the quality of life in our specific community, which lies at the south end of the northeast quadrant of Yonge and Eglinton. Are we supposed to be less fortunate than our neighbors who live a few blocks to the north of us or a few blocks to the south of us? You might feel at a disadvantage in casting your vote today because you don't actually know what it's like to live in our community. So please listen generously to the folks who do and who are speaking to you today. Then picture yourself living under these conditions. When you cast your vote for option 3, You will help create a more livable community for everyone who lives, works, and plays at Yonge and Eglinton. And at the same time, you will actually be upholding the promising vision and values embodied by city planners in the Midtown in Focus document. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions of the deputant? Councillor Robinson.
You were part of the working group that came up with option 4 that then is now presented to committee as option 3.
That is true.
Do you feel that was actually a compromise? Because what you developed was actually altered by planners, correct?
Absolutely. We thought it was a compromise between the planners and the residents that was achieved after, I'm going to even say, months and years of conferring with one another.
So some of the buildings, you would have liked to have seen 15, but they were 20, went up to 20. The planners altered the working group's option by going up to 20, 18, 18, 27, 29, 24, 26, but really the working group was just looking for 15.
That's accurate.
So there was a lot of compromise at play as part of option 3, which is before committee.
That's correct.
Principal Mack sent a letter into committee.
He did.
I was blown away by that letter, that a principal would write something and actually, he was actually vying for, very clearly supporting option 3.
He did, as did his predecessor, Joel Gorenkoff, who was principal at that school for 5 years and worked shoulder to shoulder with us in pushing for reduced height and density. May I also add that the principal at St. Monica's Public School also supported our initiative of reducing heights and density.
Okay, and at the public meeting, again, the councillors weren't there, didn't have the luxury of being there, but was it standing room only, and what was the feeling about the building heights in the neighborhood?
As we've heard before, it was overwhelmingly in support of what was option 4 at that meeting, which has turned into option 3, which I would say, if the planners were to respond, they would say that it was presented to this meeting because of the overwhelming support at that meeting.
Okay, thank you very much.
Is there anything else? No. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. The next speaker I have is John Kaiser, then Christopher Tanzola.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I hope to be able to place on here, and I didn't get what I wanted there. That is the first page of my letter. Excuse me. First of all, I want to thank you very much for giving me an opportunity to appear in front of you once more. I'm a partner in the firm of Kaiser Mason Ball. We are the solicitors for the society who own the office building at 2239 Yonge Street. Our clients have entered into an agreement with the owners of the adjoining property at 2245 Yonge Street, Gensel Properties, and this afternoon I know that my friend Chris Tanzola, who is their legal counsel, together with Dr. Arif Duramshi, wished to speak with you if you would be pleased to hear their deputation. Essentially, I want to repeat to you in the clearest of terms that our clients recognize the tough work and the background with respect to the Midtown update, but I can't tell you that we support the work that has been done up to this point because of the reliance on Section 26 of the Planning Act. There is an axe that's about to fall on our clients' necks if you should proceed, and it's as simply stated as this. Section 26, subsection 9 of the Planning Act provides that should you update the secondary plan for the Yonge Eglinton area, as you plan on doing, then within 3 years you have an obligation to then change, alter, and update as well the zoning bylaw. At that moment in time, should you permit the options that we've heard about this afternoon to proceed, you will include Schedule 2112, which identifies our clients' properties at 2239 and our friends at 2245 as an 8-story building. That's dead wrong in my view. I've suggested to you that if you consider that you wish to proceed further, then what we're going to ask of you is that you exempt this property in the manner in which I've described in the wording that appears on the first page of my letter to you of July 3rd. Simply remove the height limit on the properties known municipally as 2239 and 2245 Yonge Street to determine the height limits through site-specific analysis, applying built form and design policies, applying the existing zoning bylaw heights and applicable guidelines. In that fashion, you would preserve our client's opportunity to continue to own and provide facilities that it does in this location. It's the right thing to do. Our clients have presented themselves by appearing at a development application review, which I think a pre-consultation meeting just on the 19th of this past month, and at that point it was clear from your planners that although they understood that the uses that our clients apply to their building and so forth, they would not consider the changes which we are pursuing, nor the concept design which our client will have described by my friend Dr. Duramshi. Effectively, Schedule 2112, which I am referring to, defines an 8-story limit with respect to the property owned by our clients and its joint venture partner, and reflects merely the podium level, which is characteristic of the buildings that are located within the Yonge-Eglinton study area. Effectively, I think that whoever has drawn these schedules has simply said, we're just going to treat these people the way we wish to. They have no rights. And I consider this to be a form of expropriation without compensation. But the axe is in your hands. Don't use it, please. Preserve our clients' rights. Don't alter things. Remove this 8-story designation. That's what I came for. But before I leave, I want to say that as well, I'm in support of the presentation and the letters that have been given to you by my friend David Bromskill of the firm of Goodmans, where he describes the effect of using Section 26 for the purpose of the process you're following. There are alternatives in the Planning Act. It's a great act. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Kaiser. There are questions of you from Councillor Campbell.
Councillor Campbell.
So you would like the owner of the building to have an opportunity to make the building taller than 8 stories, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
How much revenue does your client get out of that building on an annual basis?
Gee, I can't answer that.
But isn't it all about revenue? I mean, if they want to go higher, it's about revenue and profitability, is it not?
No, with respect, Councillor Campbell, my clients are made up of 8,400 people who are employed by the province of Ontario, and they run your nuclear plants.
Okay.
They have their offices in this building, and they do have tenants.
Right.
Not many.
Who owns the building?
A numbered company owned by the Society of Union Professionals.
Right, but you represent that company,
Yes, sir.
correct? Right. So, I mean, ultimately, if they would like, do they want to replace that building?
Yes, sir.
They want to replace that building?
Yes, sir.
So why do they want to replace that building?
They have the building, it can be more suitably.
They want to replace the building for more office space, correct?
Yes, sir.
Well, there's plenty of opportunity in Toronto to build office space other than Yonge and Eglinton, isn't there?
There is.
Yeah.
This is their first choice. These crossroads, this is a world-class city that we're living in. This is one of the best centers in all the world for
Right.
development right now. And our clients have presented a concept design to your staff.
Right, okay, thank you.
Proceed.
Thank you.
Anyone
I don't
else?
see any other questions. Thank you, Mr. Kaiser.
Thank you very much.
I have Christopher Tanzola, then Arif Darmashi. So I have a tag team here.
We're going to go serially, though, one at a time. And
So who do I have then?
it'll be Christopher Tanzola going first. That's me.
And then beside you is?
Is Dr. Arif Duramshi.
Okay, same item as we were just hearing?
The same item, yeah.
Okay, and after that, then, I have Avner Mandelman. And after Avner is Megan Lockington.
Thank you very much, Councillor Shiner and the members of the committee. Appreciate the opportunity to speak with you today. My client, Gencel Properties, Inc., owns the property at 2245 Yonge Street, and many of you may be familiar with it as the Tim Hortons at the southeast corner of Yonge and Eglinton. It's a two-story building. There's a Tim Hortons on the ground floor, and there's a hair salon above it. It is immediately south of the first property at the corner of Yonge and Eglinton. My correspondence is before you. It's item 31.7.66, and that's in addition to correspondence we submitted to the earlier part of this public meeting. And I commend it to your reading, and I've put up the first page of my correspondence as well, because we're seeking the same modification that Mr. Kaiser is seeking. As Mr. Kaiser said, the two property owners are working together in terms of these submissions. I echo the concerns that have been made regarding the use of Section 26, and I commend to the committee the discussion that's in the letters from other solicitors with respect to Section 26. The plan that's before you today does contain a number of policies that are very supportive and very good policies, in my opinion. In particular, there's a discussion of using context plans to ensure coordinated development and using the city's urban design guidelines to achieve good planning through their consistent application. And part of the complaint that my client has had throughout the process of the secondary plan and in other processes that I'm going to speak about has been that those good planning ideas that are contained in the secondary plan were not brought to bear on the analysis of the southeast corner of Yonge and Eglinton, which, as Mr. Kaiser has just said, is an extremely important location, not just in this secondary plan, but in the entire city of Toronto. And we've identified in our letter concerns that we have with the treatment of these two properties at 2239 and 2245 Yonge Street, concerns with respect to how they're being treated pursuant to the provincial policy statement and the growth plan. Now, we've been involved in this process. I personally have been involved on behalf of Gencel Properties since 2015. My client's been involved longer than that. We've been involved in the OPA 289 process, which was the public realm policies for Yonge and Eglinton. We've been involved in the site-specific application at 1 Eglinton East. We've been involved in this current secondary plan process, and my client before my time was involved in the site-specific applications at 2221 Yonge Street. We've had many meetings with staff. We've attended all the community meetings. We've attended all the open houses. As Mr. Kaiser said, we've recently attended a pre-application consultation meeting at which we presented a 14-story proposal for these two sites. But our concern is that we feel that we've been ignored and we feel that we've been dismissed. And Dr. Duramsky is going to speak a little bit about that as well. And what we see in this secondary plan, which proposes only 8 stories for this site, as Mr. Kaiser said, sort of envisioning the podium of the next door developments, we don't see what the vision of this plan is for this current 2-story building, how it's supposed to develop at this important intersection with the permissions that are being granted under this plan. What we see instead is sort of a default in the planning of this site, and sort of this site being treated as a leftover. Now, the current revisions that are before you to the secondary plan following the community consultation meeting on the 25th do indicate that there may be 5 additional stories available to certain developments that are proposing office uses. And what my client and the society are proposing are indeed office uses, and in particular medical office uses. However, the wording of the policies that were added to the plan in the current report that's before you are unclear as to whether those 5 stories would apply to this site. And so I'd say if they were intended to apply to this site, then the language in the plan needs to be sharpened and made clearer. Dr. Duramsky is here to speak about not only his disappointment with the process so far, but also to share with you his vision for the site. And he's able to speak much more eloquently than I am about that vision for the site. And once you've heard what Dr. Duramsky has to say, I would refer you back to the letters that I've provided and that Mr. Kaiser has provided, and the recommendation in that letter. And what we're asking is that this committee remove the height limit on the properties known municipally as 2239 and 2245 Yonge Street, and that's an 8-story, 29-meter height limit, to determine the height limits through site-specific analysis, applying built form and design policies, the existing zoning bylaw height, which is 61 meters, or about 15 stories in the existing zoning bylaw, and applicable urban design guidelines. That's our request of the committee. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you very much. Mr. Duramsche, are you going to speak now?
There's no questions?
Are there any questions of visiting councillors? First, we'll go to visiting councillors. None? Seeing none? Councillor
How
Campbell?
long has your client owned the site?
I'm going to defer that question to Dr. Duramsche.
14 years, sir.
14 years. So he's owned it for 14 years, and now all of a sudden he wants to develop it into an 8-story building.
I will
Or above
detail,
that.
I'll detail you the reasons why.
Okay.
Chair Shiner and councillors of the PGMC, I am Dr. Arif Duramsche, a principal of Gensel Properties and a practicing emergency room physician. My deputation today is in addition to my previous deputation and in support of our written submissions from Mr. Chris Tanzola of Overland LLP and the deputation and submission of Mr. John Kaiser representing our south neighbour, the Society of United Professionals. The Society of United Professionals wishes to expand their head office and bring high-quality employment. We at Gensel would like to build a medical complex with 30 to 40 physicians providing much-needed medical urgent care, diagnostic imaging, laboratory services along primary and specialized medical care. In the spirit of comprehensive planning, we have come together and proposed to build a 100,000 square foot, 14-story specialized hybrid medical office building right at the southeast Young Eglinton subway entrance, creating 300 to 400 jobs at an investment of $25 to $30 million. Chairman Shiner, thank you for granting us deferral of the proposed plan on June 8, 2018 for further consultation. Accordingly, we met with City Planning staff on June 19th for a pre-application meeting and attended the community consultation meeting on June 21st, 2018. Your direction to City staff was consider increasing employment opportunities within the area, including along Yonge Street, Eglinton Avenue, and other key streets and intersections served by the existing and future transit station. This was not adequately fulfilled. Accordingly, we requested PGMC to consider removing the height limits on the properties known municipally as 2239 and 2245 Yonge Street to determine the height limits through the site-specific analysis, applying built form and design policies, the existing zoning bylaws, and applicable guidelines. We assembled our entire team for the pre-application meeting with city staff on June 19th, including our architect, senior land use planner from Bousfields, traffic engineer from WSP, costing consultants from CBRE, legal representatives, and owner representation from both properties. We were met by a single planner and an urban designer. An architectural presentation was followed by a land use planning rationale. Our design proposal is within our current as-of-right zoning and respectful of all required municipal and contractual spatial separations. The city planner was hesitant to endorse our proposal due to the previously endorsed 1 Eglinton Avenue's proposal that is a mere 6.8 meters from our north property line and in defiance of the tall building guidelines. Several requests for suggested modifications and elaboration went unanswered. I am perplexed. We attended the community consultation meeting on June 21st, 2018. The facilitated workshop on lowering building heights on the north side of Eglinton, spearheaded by the councillor, received most of the focus. For tall building sites, the additional 5 stories of office will not make up for the loss of employment use in the scale-back permissions. The net result is no additional employment use generated. I stood up twice, but due to the time constraint, I did not get to speak. There are far more mid-rise sites in the plan area. Why have these sites been omitted from preferential inducement for employment uses? I was not selected, and my question regarding our specialized hybrid site and mid-rise sites in general remains unanswered. In all 3 options, our combined site is marked for 8 stories, that is 29 meters. Modern medical buildings are engineered with subfloor servicing to enable surgical suites, procedural rooms, and lead lining for X-ray suites. The net impact is we would probably get only 7 floors in 29 meters, making the proposal unfeasible. Councillors, pause for a moment and look at the confluence of positive events. A group of doctors owns a property atop the southeast Young Eglinton subway intersection. This is center ice. You can't get a better site for patient accessibility. They're experienced, motivated, and well capitalized. They've forged comprehensive planning initiatives with their south neighbour. They've presented a proposal that is supported by Toronto's foremost planning, engineering, and architectural consultants. We want to be part of the solution to Midtown healthcare accessibility and the overcrowding crisis in the Sunnybrook Emergency Department. We want to create a medical micro-community of high-quality jobs. Why are we being denied adequate independent consideration? Councillors, our dreams of a medical centre is not new. We purchased the property 14 years ago and have patiently waited for a feasible opportunity. 5 years ago, we reaffirmed our long-term development objectives at the 22-21 Young OMB proceedings. On June 1st, 2017, that is last year, we met city staff and reiterated our development objectives and asked city staff to respect the 12.5-meter side yard tall building guidelines so as not to impact our future development objectives. We were very disappointed to learn city staff had issued a final report for our north neighbor at 1 Eglinton Avenue East on September 29, 2017, endorsing a 65-story condo tower with a mere 6.8-meter setback from the Gensal site. Consider the implications for a moment. In order to accommodate a 65-story condo on a posted stamp lot, city staff have disregarded the tall building guidelines and effectively expropriated the development potential of our lands from the current 61 meters as of right zoning, which would be 14 stories, down to 29 meters or 7 stories. Is this right? Gensal has been assessed by MPAC as a 61-meter development site zoning and
15 seconds, please.
and accordingly paid property taxes for the last 14 years. The plan before you now formalizes this qualification. Is this right? The 1 Eglinton zoning bylaw amendments have not yet passed, so the application and appeal process are not complete. Downzoning and Gensal site before you would be prejudicial to any appeal process. Is this right? Higher order planning policies clearly call for intensification, upzoning, not downzoning, particularly for employment and institutional uses as we propose. Is this right? What would the Minister of Municipal Affairs say? The fundamental question.
Thank you, sir. I've just gone over your time by 30 seconds. Thank you very much. Are there any questions of the deputant? Councillor Campbell.
So this is the site, this is presently a 2-story building with a Tim Hortons below it?
Correct.
And you've had the site for 14 years?
Correct.
Why have you not developed it prior to now?
Because it is only feasible at this point in time. As density increases, rents increase, and the feasibility works now.
So, and the only thing feasible is 14 stories?
Well, 7 is not.
Right.
12 maybe.
And who's going in there?
In terms of medical,
How are you going to fill the building?
with an urgent care clinic, primary care services, specialized care services, and the Society of Engineers consuming about half the building.
Where are the Society of Engineers now?
There are immediate neighbors to the south. So this is a co-joint venture. They'd take half the building, we'd take the other half.
Okay, and did you meet with any of the resident groups? Because the resident groups have had a very well-organized and vocal formation of opinion that I think has been impressed upon city staff. Have you met with the local residents?
We have informally.
Did you meet with them?
Yes, we have.
You did? Okay.
Informally.
And did you talk to them about,
They
how
are
the
in
benefits?
favor of medical uses in the area and at the site.
Okay. Okay, I don't have any other questions. I find it odd that, just as this comes to the fruition and we come to the final plan, all of a sudden it's feasible for 14 stories and nothing less. I mean, you've had the building for 14 years.
Councillor Clemmer, may I address that last
Sure.
comment? One of the items that I alluded to in my deputation was that we have been involved in a number of processes at the planning level, and they go back to at least the approval of the building at 2221 Yonge Street, which is immediately south of the engineers building. And that process was back in 2013, 2014, and that's when the development aspirations for this site,
Okay.
with respect to Dr. Duramsky, has started. So to say that we've waited until
Okay.
the last moment, I think is not, it's part of the point I was trying to make in my deputation, perhaps didn't make it effectively enough. We have been trying to draw this to City Council's attention, to the Planning and Growth Management Committee, Toronto East York,
So-
and the planning departments for a number of years now.
Okay, so I mean, generally, 14 stories in the context of 65 stories, 50 stories, 40 stories is not egregious, and the fact that it's not a condo, it's actually bringing office jobs, is something that would be seen as a positive. So I'm just surprised that your backs are against the wall right at this point.
We're very surprised about that too, Councillor.
Okay,
That is why the request for the motion, sir.
okay, thank you.
Okay, are there any other questions of the deputants? Seeing none, thank you very much for your presentation this afternoon. Our next speaker is Avner Mandelman. Welcome, Mr. Mandelman. You've got 5 minutes.
Chairman Shiner, councillors, thank you for taking the time, member of the audience. Thank you for the chance to speak. Again, my name is Avner Mandelman. I'm a member of the board of the Republic Resident Association, living at 25 Broadway Avenue for 3 years and 20 years in the neighborhood. I know it well. I've come today to respectfully urge you to vote for option number 3 of the Yonge-Eglinton secondary plan. Such a vote, in my opinion, would correct an injustice and help redress iniquity and harm that were inflicted on our neighborhood perhaps unknowingly, and most importantly, prevent greater harm and injustice in future. I don't think anybody here stressed yet the point of fairness. Ours is a very small corner of young Eglinton, but it has somehow been made into a density dump, suffering most of the cost of growth on behalf of the entire young Eglinton nexus. Why? Don't just take my word for it. Like others before have urged you, I urge you to come to our neighborhood, to walk in our shoes, so to speak, and to experience what City Hall's policies brought upon us and upon our neighbors. No need for me to repeat all my colleagues have said. They've said it eloquently. I'll just make 5 points about the overdevelopment, the dangerous subway, the escalating traffic and risk to school children, lack of green space, and utilities and resources well beyond the tipping point. First, overdevelopment. The tall towers are well beyond the planned maximum block, as many have said before. They're blocking sunlight and air, and now also blocking the sky. And the dust and construction everywhere are damaging our health. It's going to get worse. Again, why? Everything in one small place. Second, the subway. The young Eglinton subway is dangerously crowded, and it's getting more dangerous daily. And again, I urge you to come experience it. It often feels like a Japanese subway with pushers needed to squeeze passengers in, but without a large expanse and the safety zones. Again, why? Third, the traffic. It is turning potentially more dangerous by the day. There are more than 1,400 school children on Broadway Avenue alone. There's 1,200 in North Toronto Collegiates when one of my sons went to school, and more than 200 in Santa Monica, some of which younger than 10. The school street is being made into a mini 401 in the middle of the city with the kids living on both sides of it. Sooner or later, some child may be hurt, based on your vote today. The principal of North Toronto Collegiate is alarmed, and he wrote to you, as some other people have mentioned, and so has the principals of Santa Monica, and so are the kids' parents, and so are we. In fact, on a personal level, this is a major reason why I chose to get involved and stay involved. Kids, they don't have a voice in here. I hope one of us are going to be their voice. But over and beyond all that, again, I've come to ask for fairness. It seems perhaps trite to say it, but we all know Canada was built and is based on fairness. If there's one national religion, it is one of fairness. When you and your colleagues, including Councillor Jay Robinson, who have been so helpful to us, work to ensure that both benefits and costs are divided fairly and equally, at present they are not. And it is this unfairness that caused my neighbors and me to mobilize, to correct it, and to stay mobilized. Now again, I'm going to stress a point that again was made before. We are not against development. We wouldn't have been here, and we wouldn't have chosen to live in the area we live if we were. But if we are against dangerous, the Wild West developments were suppliers to the city, which is what developers are. They're suppliers to the corporation, are perceived to benefit unduly at the expense of shareholders, which is what we, the citizens, are. And this perceived unfairness is what brought my colleagues and neighbors and me to City Hall to express our views to you directly, our elected directors and management, and to ask for your support. Indeed, you and your vote are the only thing standing between us and further injustice, and you have a chance to make a wrong right. And again, on a personal level, isn't this why you probably chose public service in the first place? Now, I again respectfully urge you to vote for the plan number 3. It is a most reasonable compromise, and it's the only means, as I can see, to redress the harm done to us and prevent more than done in the future. And again, make the city fair to all its citizens. I thank you for your attention and for your public service. Any questions, I'll be happy to answer.
Thank you. Are there any questions of the deputant?
Sure.
So option 3, which you've spoken about, conforms to the growth plan and is consistent with the provincial policy statement.
That's good. As far as I understand, yes.
And so that's actually been stated. Are you aware that's on page 13 of the planning report before?
Yes, I understand. I understand. It's conformed to the plan, and if there are any minor differences, they are really very minor.
Okay, thank you very much.
Sure.
Thank you. The next deputant I have is Megan Lockington-Minns, then Ann Mislowski. And for those of you that are here, if your comments have been made already by others and you can support those, we still have a lot of deputants here, and I want to make sure we maintain quorum at the meeting, because we're a little bit shy on quorum today, so if you can help us move through, it is appreciated.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Shiner and members of this committee for allowing me to speak today. My name is Megan Lockington-Minns, and I live in Davisville Village, part of Ward 22. My home is about a 30-minute walk from Yonge and Eglinton. I am here to present the results of a petition circulated in the Yonge and Eglinton surrounding communities, which states, "Together, we demand that plans for community-located public schools with capacity for present and future student populations be approved and adequately resourced before new residential developments are approved by the City of Toronto." This petition was started in mid-June. As of today, we have 279 signatories. This statement echoes Councillor Matlow's request, and I quote, "for a pause on all development until the much-needed hard infrastructure and social services are in place to provide the high quality of life that our community deserves." Myself and other members of our community felt this petition was necessary after attending a Toronto District School Board, TDSB, meeting in June. At this meeting, we were told that the rapid growth at Yonge and Eglinton and the lack of plans for necessary infrastructure to support that booming population means the kids of my neighborhood may lose their community school for 2 years. TDSB has suggested a drastic renovation to our neighborhood community school to accommodate the influx of students from Yonge and Eglinton because a new school wasn't planned in time. This plan, which physically removes our children from our vibrant community to another location over a 15-minute bus trip away while it closes for reconstruction, could be avoided if plans for a new school near Yonge and Eglinton were made a priority. Looking back at this committee's June 7th meeting notes, I was very happy to see Councillor Shiner's proposed motions to request city staff to meet with senior staff in the Ministry of Education and the Ministry of Municipal Affairs to explore a funding strategy to meet the capital requests of the TDSB to support the timely provision of school facilities, and the request that city staff and the TDSB identify potential sites to accommodate 800 pupils to increase capacity north of Eglinton Avenue. However, I respectfully ask this committee to make a new school at Yonge and Eglinton an immediate priority for this growing neighborhood, as opposed to simply exploring a funding strategy and identifying sites. This needs to be an immediate priority. When a school is in their neighborhood, the children will be given a place where they feel safe and that they belong. A school can be the heart of the community and make residents feel ownership and pride of their neighborhood. Because of the lack of timely planning for this new school, the children of my community are at risk of losing their neighborhood school and being taken from their community. Please work as quickly as possible to identify a site and find a funding strategy to meet the capital requirements to build a new school for the Yonge and Eglinton neighborhood. The city, the province, and TDSB need to work together to get this done now. Thank you for your time today and for listening to my thoughts.
Thank you. Are there questions from non-committee members?
Very
Councillor
brief
Robbins.
again. Just my understanding is now they're sending kids in the area, Yonge Eglinton area, to Rosedale.
Yes.
Have you heard that?
I have, and to Whitney, I believe, is one of the schools, yes.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I do have a question.
Yes, certainly.
Your presentation was asking us, the city, to find a funding model, to find a site, and to build a school.
Not the city, but to work together with the TDSB and the province to get that done.
But you're aware that this is not unique to this location,
Certainly.
and you're aware that we can't do that. All we can do is request.
I request that you request that.
So we've doing that in ours. I think the activity, and that's a question of you, is I don't want to lose quorum. Okay. Great. It seems to be like we have a revolving door here. That's why I said we're short members, so if more than one walks out of the room, we have to stop. So I guess my question is, this is a school board issue. So what are you and your community doing to get the school board to take care of it, as far too often people come here and ask us to do something that we cannot do, although we recognize very well the extreme problem that's out there.
I guess many people here are talking about option 3, which reduces some of the density of the area, which would help with the problem that the TDSB is having right now.
Okay, thank you. See no other questions. The next speaker I have is Ann Mislowski, and then John Bossons.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ann Mislowski, and I'm a resident of Ward 25 at 900 Mount Pleasant Road. I've been living in the young Eglinton area for the past 26 years. The reason I chose to remain in this neighborhood after selling my house on Sherwood Avenue, which is also in Ward 25, where I lived and I raised my children. They went to John Fisher Public School, which had been my home for 16 years prior to 2008, when I bought and moved to my condo on Mount Pleasant Road at Broadway, was the following. It combined everything I was looking for. This was a safe, quiet, family-oriented residential area, and yet it offered the convenience of shopping and entertainment at a walking distance. The view from my 12th floor balcony, it's a 19-story building, offers me a feeling of city living, a healthy mix of concrete structures, of green space, mainly treetops, but I see them, and of something very precious, the sky, with, when we're lucky, the sun during the day and the stars at night. I'm about to lose that with the construction of 2 towers on 110, 114, and 120 of Broadway Avenue, 24 and 35 stories, which I understand is in reality 34 and 41 stories, practically next door to my balcony facing west. I'll be facing a wall, just like Mr. Dumoulin mentioned, which will be twice the height of my condo building. And this is my retirement investment. I love my condo. I love my sunsets. And why developers should be allowed to profit at my expense, at the expense of many of us who have been living in this area for many, many years. I find this trend of giving in to developers absolutely baffling. And don't get me going about the Ontario Municipal Board. I don't like to use bad language in public. I'm not against progress, I want to stress that, and I'm not anti-development per se, but it has to make sense. There is a way to allow for growth while respecting the existing and future residents, and for that, you have to think ahead. My concerns with the existing and proposed development in the area are the following. And, well, they've been mentioned before, and I don't want to waste your time. It's the infrastructure and the pressure on parks and community centers and libraries, and especially a school space for children. I'm a retired school teacher, so I really care about that issue of children seeing a school from their balcony and not being able to attend it. I find this sad. And I'm affected already by an increase traffic and congestion, specifically on Broadway, Roehampton, and Redpath, overcrowding on transit and sidewalks, and safety issue for pedestrians, shadow impact on adjacent schools and parks and all that, and health impact due to poor air quality, noise level, and especially loss of sunlight, without mentioning the mess and dust and noise generated by endless construction sites. And to summarize what Miria mentioned, just on 1 block radius on Broadway Avenue from Redpath to Mount Pleasant, so 1 block, there are 8 planned or approved construction of buildings ranging from 28 to 39 stories in height. Like, for me, this is outrageous. It doesn't make any sense. So, therefore, option 3, which meets all the provincial requirements and limits new buildings to 20 and 15 stories, is for me the only acceptable and reasonable compromise between the community ratepayers and planners. And I'm counting on you, members, the planning members, to listen to our plight and vote for option number 3. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak out.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Are there any questions of the deputant? Seeing none.
Thank you.
I've got John Boston.
We would like to appear together, if we may, sir.
You've done that before.
Mr. Kettle is the deputy following me.
I know. Mr. Kittle, I noticed that you're also down here to speak later.
Yes.
I do want to make sure we get the meeting done today and we don't lose quorum.
Yeah, they're different issues. They're quite
I
different
know,
issues.
but between you, it's 10 minutes. If you could find a way to cover all the topics at once, it would really be appreciated because.
Okay, well, I can add it on, because we are two, so we'd have the 10 anyway, right?
Yeah, if you can do it within 10 minutes,
Yeah.
because, again, as I've said earlier, we are hearing repeats of concerns that people have, and if you could say that you support it and let us get on, I'd
Well,
like.
the second issue is the Leaside issue, the Bayview issue, which I think you may know about anyway, which I can cover separately.
No, but if we run out of quorum or people leave, we don't get any recommendations to council. We don't have another chance to come back. I'm trying to believe as polite as I can, but anyway, you and the public can help us just to be brief with the concerns so we can identify them, and it's not just the two of you, but everyone else who's still here. It would be appreciated because, as I said, it's already getting on in the afternoon, and there will be questions of staff after, and there will be some motions, I expect, so we aren't going to just finish at the end of the deputations.
We appreciate that, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Chair, my name is Jeff Cattell, and I'm co-chair of the Federation of North Toronto Resident Associations, and John Bostons is a member of our board. And as an organization that has been participating actively in all stages of Midtown in Focus, as of a number of our member resident associations within the North Toronto, Lower North York area, we frankly are unwilling to be drawn into recommending among the choice of options for this piece of the plan, one quadrant out of four, which in a sense is viewed out of context of consideration of the whole area. Like the plan was on all four, not just on the 1/4. And at this late stage in a process that has been marked by strong public engagement efforts on the part of city staff, we acknowledge that the development anticipated by the plan already meets or exceeds provincial growth plan requirements, but understand that the city is not in a position to challenge this. We supported the effort to define fixed height unit limits, which we were assured but were based on modeling that took into account all city guidelines such as setbacks, angular planes, park requirements, and the growth plan, and so on, to limit any negative impacts of density such as shadowing. We appreciate the plan's comprehensive look at growing population needs for open space, employment, transit, etc. In other words, a complete community, and where development should take place and in what form. However, approvals of individual applications, whether by the OMB or by the city, cannot deal adequately with overall infrastructure issues. The key issue that the plan does not and cannot mitigate by itself is the lack of transit capacity, the problem which will be exacerbated with the LRT opening, the absence of a young relief line, no plan to resolve that, and by possible future approvals of an extension of the young line to Richmond Hill, outside of the city's control. While Midtown in Focus provides a planning framework for future new development that results in significant residential intensification, it simply cannot proceed as provided for in the plan without controls on the implementation of the plan. We offer a three-part proposal to address this. First of all, permit employment-generating developments and other non-residential uses to proceed, because they basically keep people in the area and they don't involve travel. Secondly, restrict residential development to small projects to be defined. And thirdly, develop a phasing plan for the Midtown in Focus plan that would be tied to transit and other missing infrastructure for the young corridor actually coming on stream. So you don't just willy-nilly have things happen. So we recommend that planning staff be requested to report to City Council in 2019 on these three aspects of a controlled implementation process. John?
Okay, as a number of people have said, there's a lack of infrastructure here. People are not able to send their kids to schools in the area. There's a shortage of parks. Development in the Young Eglinton area is essentially out of control, thanks in large part to the OMB having taken over planning from the city. I understand, I trust that the motion you made, Councillor Shiner, at the last meeting will be brought back again. One of the elements of that motion was to ask the planning staff to update its ridership projections, which have not been updated to take into account the effect of all of the OMB-approved developments that have occurred. We're facing a situation in Young Eglinton, We're facing a situation in Young Eglinton where already it is virtually impossible to get on the subway in the morning rush hour without having to wait for several trains. Even worse, at stations to the south, down to Bloor. Bloor itself is at this point a dangerous station. Young Eglinton, with the opening of the Eglinton LRT, is also going to be a dangerous situation. Do we have to wait for somebody to be pushed off the program, off the station platform onto the tracks and be killed before the city starts dealing with the fact that there is a mismatch between infrastructure and development? There's an absolute, I believe there's an absolute imperative for this committee and for council to put a moratorium on development, not just adopt option 3, but put a moratorium on future development until infrastructure catches up. I'm not opposed, we are not opposed to development, but we are opposed to development without the infrastructure to support it. So I just urge you, please, think about the future. Think about the people that are living there. And please, bring infrastructure into line, accelerate the development of the downtown relief line up to Eglinton and Shepherd, because if it just goes to Bloor, it does nothing for the situation in Young Eglinton. And ask staff to bring back recommendations in mid-2019 that will deal with the implications of the huge increase in ridership way beyond previously projected that has to be thought about and dealt with. Those are my comments, sir.
Thank you. Mr. Kettle, did you want to go into the Leaside issues while you're here as well?
I can do, sure.
That'll be great.
So I'm putting on another hat here. I'm putting on the hat as co-president of the Leaside Property Owners Association, and we have a very specific concern, a request to change in the Midtown in Focus plan to maintain the neighborhoods designation for the properties on the east side of Bayview, north from Parkhurst Boulevard, just south of Eglinton Avenue, including the set of 10 quadruplexes, the double duplexes, instead of designating them as mixed use as proposed by the plan. This request is driven by the unique heritage and locational attributes of these properties. The 3 reasons are as follows. Retail at grade is a primary characteristic of mixed-use land use, whereas these properties are entirely residential and are not identified. In fact, they're excluded from the retail streets designation, map 21.5. In addition, the slope of the land from Parkhurst to just before Eglinton makes it unsuitable for retail uses. Secondly, immediately behind the quads is Talbot Park, which includes the well-known Leaside baseball diamond, which is located well below grade. It creates kind of a cavern down there on the side of the former Walmsley Brook. In order to minimize shadowing on the baseball diamond, it's essential to maintain low-rise rather than mid-rise or high-rise on Bayview in proximity to this park. As neighborhoods, there is a 4-story height limit, whereas under the mixed use, that would be 7 or more stories. Conversion to mixed use would cause serious shadowing on the diamond. Avoidance of shadowing on public parks is a key principle in good planning, which has not been upheld in this case. The third reason is that it's unclear or unknown whether mixed use is compatible with the heritage designation of the quadruplexes, 2 of which have already been designated. So it would be problematic to have 7-story or more buildings here. All 10, I won't go into the detail about that. So this request has been discussed with city planning staff and supported by Councillor Burnside, who couldn't be here this afternoon. Thank you. I would be pleased if you would make that motion.
Thank you. Are there any questions from my colleagues? So I have one. The areas that you're talking about on Bayview, if I have it correctly from my colleague, is 1747 to 1785 Bayview on one side?
That's it. It's just on the east side.
On the one side.
And the thing is that east side of Bayview was only added to Midtown in Focus in the last 6 months.
I know the issues. I'm just trying to get clarification of the addresses because a lot of my colleagues have come to me with different requests. I'm trying to make sure I have the right one in front of me. Thank you very much. I don't see any other questions, and thank you for keeping your time down. It is appreciated. So the next speaker I have is John Hideman. I'm close with that.
Yes.
And after that, I have Al Keevy.
And I have my wingman, Al Keevy, with me. So hopefully, if we can motor on through, we can give you 2 speakers for the time slot of 1.
And then after that, I have Deirdre Monroe. So we're here to listen to you.
All right. Thank you very much for the opportunity. Mr. Chair and members of the committee, Mr. Keevy and I are board members from the South Eglinton Ratepayers and Residents Association, known as SARA. We're here to speak about the development issues, somewhat specific, of course, to our area, but we do very much recognize the issues in the entire study area, and we've been active in all of those developments, even beyond the exact scope of our area. We echo the comments and support much of what you've heard from the residents about the development pressures, about the impact that exists on livability, and especially in regard to the infrastructure, the soft infrastructure, parks, of play spaces, of schools especially, and you're going to have a deputant from the TDSB as well, so I'll anticipate echoing the comments of that deputant and supporting those. In our letter to the committee, we've noted 4 points that I'd like to just go through with you quickly and highlight a couple of things from that. We find that we could support any of the 3 options presented, and we have criteria, though, that we would urge you to consider in doing so. First of all, that whatever proposal, whatever option is selected by the committee to recommend to City Council, that it conform to, be consistent with, and have regard to the various provincial plans, policy statements, and the interests in the Planning Act. So we're concerned there that we not move forward today with a plan that meets our hopes and aspirations, but violates ultimately and perhaps inadvertently the Planning Act. So what I would request is that you, Mr. Chair, or any of the members of the committee ask staff if they can actually support at the province all of the options available, or whether the fact that they've provided their advice previously in the final report causes any difficulties, and perhaps ask them if they see a way around that, or if any of you, for that matter, have a way around that. We see that as an obstacle that we find greatly concerning. We'd also like to see that the maximum possible employment opportunities are supported. We very much echo those comments. We want a complete community. We want what the community has been so successfully for so long, which is a place to work, a place to live, a place to shop, a place to find entertainment. And increasingly, with the developments that we see, we're finding that the community is turning into a bedroom community, which is ridiculous to our view, that a thriving community at a crossroads of two major transit lines, one not yet open but soon to be, would turn into somehow a bedroom community from which people must commute out in order to go to their employment, and which also then has a lack of the restaurants supported by lunchtime crowds, so that they would be there for the evening crowds as well, and all of the other services and facilities and amenities, entertainment options, and those kinds of things that make a complete community. We also very much would like to see the lowest possible additional permitted tower height in the Eglinton corridor for future and current development applications not yet approved, as long as the previous criteria are satisfied. It's the case that there's disagreement in the room, no doubt. I'm sure there are people in the audience behind who would like to see maximum density and maximum height. We've heard from many people who would like very much the opposite. We would all like that, I think, as residents and citizens. Mr. Chair, I understand you are familiar with the neighborhood and would understand those concerns very well. Just want to make sure that we live in a society of laws, and thank goodness that gives us a way to resolve these conflicting views and conflicting preferences. We want to make sure that we adhere knowingly to the best advice that we can get to make sure that we don't put forward a plan that ultimately fails, ultimately falls flat, where we lose all of the many benefits of the thousands of people's opinions and time and consultation that has gone into building this plan, all the hard work and time and money invested on the part of city staff to give us something complete.
I've got to watch the time here.
Okay.
Al, you wanted to speak too?
I'll yield a minute to John if I can, just for him.
Oh, we don't
Okay.
do that. We don't have two people sit down
Let me just finish if I
and one
can.
give minutes to somebody else.
Okay, yeah. Let me just finish if I can. We did work jointly on the letter. In addition, Sarah would like to draw attention to the lack of school facilities in the young Eglinton area. That's issue's been raised many times today. And we'd also like to direct attention to the lack of parkland and open spaces. And again, that's been recognized many times today. We certainly want to reinforce and compliment city planning in the extensive effort that they've given throughout the consultation process. Sarah has been very active throughout the 3 years. I believe that I've attended all of the sessions. It's been full and complete. For everyone who's taken the time and effort to do it, we've certainly believed that the city planning staff has listened very carefully, and we compliment them on a full and open process. That's the sum of our remarks. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions of the deputants?
15 seconds. I'm just wondering why you're wondering about whether it conforms to the growth plan, because it does cite that on page 13. So if you take a chance, take an opportunity just to look at that. The planners have done an excellent job saying option 3 does cover that off. And also with the ratio of jobs to residents, are you aware that it is actually, option 3 is basically the same? So again, that's in the report before us.
Yes.
So if you could look at that.
Thank you, Councillor.
That would confirm your, yeah.
I will say again that we do support all 3 options. We just want to be sure that we're not making a misstep here that ultimately causes a failure of the plan.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so the next I have is Deirdre Monroe, and then Karen Buthaveth. Is Deirdre here? I don't see a Deirdre. Karen Buthaveth? And I don't see a Karen coming forward. Danielle Castaldo? We're here to listen to you.
Okay. Chair Shiner and members of the committee, thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak with you today. My name is Dan Castaldo, and I'm the Manager of Planning with the Toronto District School Board. I'm here today to speak with you about the draft Young Eglinton Secondary Plan, and specifically to express our firm support for the importance of building complete communities and the importance of schools as key service facilities within those communities. to share the challenges the TDSB is experiencing with respect to elementary student accommodation in the Midtown area, to highlight the need to work collaboratively to identify opportunities to establish a new elementary school within the Midtown area, and to seek the support of the committee to make minor amendments to the plan as set out in Schedule A of our letters dated June 6th and July 4th, 2018. I'd like to start by acknowledging and thanking city planning staff for taking a highly collaborative approach in this exercise and for the meaningful engagement opportunities that we at the TDSB were provided throughout the process. The TDSB strongly supports the policies within the draft plan that recognize the importance of building complete communities. Schools are an integral and vital component of a complete community. The TDSB strongly believes in neighborhood schools where students have an opportunity to walk, to learn, and to participate in a wide array of extracurricular activities within their own community. Further, in addition to delivering a core curriculum, the TDSB recognizes that schools already function as community hubs, where families gather to access the social, cultural, recreational, and other resources they need together in one spot. The secondary plan categorizes schools as community service facilities, which are defined as infrastructure within the plan. Most importantly, the secondary plan includes policies which require that development does not outpace the provision of infrastructure, including key infrastructure such as schools. The TDSB is extremely supportive of this policy approach as it mirrors our objectives and is recognized as good planning. Currently, the TDSB operates 8 elementary and 2 secondary schools within the Midtown area. Enrollment at local schools has grown substantially over the past 10 years, particularly at the elementary panel, and has now reached a critical point in that our existing land and buildings are overutilized. As a result, existing elementary facilities are no longer able to accommodate additional growth. The strain on these facilities will only be exacerbated by the cumulative impact of the thousands of new units that are approved or under review at the city. It has become clear that a new elementary school is desperately needed to serve the Midtown community. The accommodation challenge is no more apparent than at Eglinton Junior Public School, which is located right in the heart of the urban growth center. The school is situated on a highly constrained site of only 1.6 acres, has no green space or appropriate playfields, cannot accommodate portables, and has no further opportunity for expansion. This past year, Eglinton Junior Public School was operating at 113% of its capacity with 575 students. Our most recent projection for the school suggests that it will reach 820 students, or 162% utilization by 2024. As of now, no further opportunities exist to accommodate additional students within the building, and other measures have been implemented. The policies of the secondary plan that pace growth commensurate with the provision of schools as a community service provides the board with confidence that securing a location for a new school will be a priority for both the board and the city. The TDSB is extremely supportive of these policies as they are critical to accommodating growth within this community. We do believe that the policies can be improved with some minor additions to better address the critical shortage of capacity at local elementary schools. The TDSB has suggested minor changes to sections 2, 5, and 6 as set out in Schedule A of our letters dated June 6th and July 4th, 2018. Although most aspects of the policy development process were highly collaborative, the board still has outstanding concerns with MAP 21-9, Midtown Mobility Network, and MAP 21-10, properties with potential cultural heritage value. The TDSB respectfully requests that approval of these 2 maps in their current form be deferred until we have had an opportunity to engage further with city staff to determine if there's a better approach that addresses our issues while still satisfying the needs of the city. In conclusion, although the TDSB requests some minor changes, we strongly support the policies of the draft plan as they relate to building complete communities and ensuring that the provision of infrastructure aligns with the pace of development. By defining schools as infrastructure, the policy framework acknowledges their importance as part of complete communities, and it reinforces the need to ensure that adequate school capacity is available. We look forward to continuing to work with the city to ensure that students and families have access to exceptional educational opportunities within Midtown. This continued collaboration between the TDSB and the city will be critical to managing growth in the area. Thank you.
Questions of the deputant? So Councillor Campbell, you're on my left. I know, usually.
So, Daniel, how are you?
Good,
thank you for coming today. In the area, how many high schools are within this particular area?
There are 2 high schools in the area. There's North Toronto Collegiate and Northern Secondary School.
And that's within the immediate area, but how many are there that are options for students in the area? It would go beyond 2.
It would go beyond that. We do have a number of schools that are nearby that have boundaries that intersect with the area, such as Lawrence Park Collegiate, Forest Hill Collegiate, Central Technical Academy. There are others.
So there's 5 or 6 high schools. What are the utilization rates of those schools?
North Toronto is operating around its capacity of 100%.
That's the new one, 1,200 students
That's
there?
1,200 students, that's right.
Yep.
Northern is also around 100%. There's 2,000 students there.
Right.
Forest Hill's operating at its capacity, a little over 100% utilization, actually, and that's by design, just for program reasons. Central Tech is slightly under, but it serves a more specialized focus, and it's open to students across the system. But I will say that the schools that are located within Midtown are what I would say choice destinations, where students that live within the area attend, and they also bring in students that live outside of the area that access the school by way of program options that are there.
And 2 quick questions with regard to the Toronto Lands Corporation. How many properties do they still have?
Off the top of my head, I would say between 60 and 70.
And do they have any in the area?
They do not.
They do not. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor DiCiano, you had questions?
Thank you. Are any plans to, between the TDSB and the province, to take funds to expand some of these schools or open up new schools?
So right now, we're planning 2 major capital projects in the area. One is the replacement of Davisville Junior Public School. So that school will be rebuilt at a much larger capacity than it is now. We're adding approximately 230 new spaces as part of that rebuild. Hodgson Middle School is another project for us, and that's the local middle school, serves students in grades 6 to 8. We had been approved for an addition by the province of 12 classrooms. But what we had found through an update of our enrollment projections for local schools, for Hodgson itself, new development information in the area, updated pupil yield factors, and that's the number of students that we can reasonably anticipate out of a development unit, that the 12-room addition at Hodgson would be woefully insufficient to accommodate us. And what would effectively happen is that the addition would be constructed, occupied, and portables would be added immediately after. We don't feel that's appropriate. And right now, we are taking a step back, and we're working on a much larger project there. And we're looking at adding not 12 rooms, but potentially up to 21 or 22. And that project involves a significant renovation of the existing older facility, as well as potentially taking down another portion of that facility and rebuilding it, including a new gym and other support spaces for students.
So are these, the first plan for expansion, is that in place? Has construction began, or are this still all on the drawing board?
So Davisville funding is in place, and we are currently working through the site plan process with the city. Hodgson funding is in place, like I said, for the 12 rooms, but we have to go back to the province, I would say, over the next couple months to seek their approval to expand the scope of the project. Part of that discussion will include options for funding. It could be something they choose to provide us funds to do, or it could be something that they direct the TDSB to fund out of their own resources. So there's a little
And
bit.
if they direct you to fund it from their own resources, that put the project on hold?
It would be effectively on hold until the board approves the funds through the budget process, but we would be seeking to use proceeds of disposition, i.e. funds that are leveraged through property sales.
So I hate that property sale strategy you guys have. It's
Everyone
disgusting.
does.
But at this point, does the TDSB not have the benefit of taking in some of the development charges that are being collected from this area to fund some of these expansions?
We do not have the ability to collect education development charges. We have
Because you have
launched,
surplus lands.
well, we've, due to a
The
system.
Catholic Board does.
Sorry?
The Catholic Board is
The
currently
Catholic Board
collecting.
does. They qualify due to an excess of enrollment over their secondary capacity, so
Yeah.
they're allowed to do that. The TDSB has a system-wide surplus of capacity, but that surplus capacity is not in areas where we need it.
Okay.
It puts us at a detriment here.
So you've given me some insight on the junior school stuff. Now, the high schools, the 2 high schools in the area, is there funding in place to solve capacity issues for the next 50 years?
No, not at secondary.
What's the plan?
So with secondary schools, it's slightly different in that we do have, I would say, more options for students. One secondary school in the area, Northern, does have programs of choice that draw in a significant population that does not reside in Midtown. If we were ever forced to engage in a review, we could look at the distribution of those programs. And what that would effectively do is open up space for local growth. We're not at that point yet, but we may be there in 5, 10, or 15 years. We're going to be undertaking a review of all of our secondary schools, looking at all programs, distribution of those programs, and that may have an impact on how we view secondary education in this area. But at this point, we're fairly confident that with the space we do have in the area and nearby, we should be okay.
Okay, thank you very much.
So Jonathan, you said, and nearby. Extrapolate.
What I would say there is
How nearby?
there are secondary properties nearby, I would say to the west of the Midtown area, that do have surplus capacity for students.
How far west?
2 to 3 kilometers. And another thing is...
So not within walking distance?
Not within walking distance, but secondary students are mobile. They will take public transit to access the programs that they want. And that's something that we certainly experience, not only here, but right across the city. So the location for junior schools and elementary schools is certainly important for a local community, for a local neighborhood. But for secondary schools, when we think about where we want those facilities, we want good access to public transit.
It's a secondary school along the Eglinton Avenue LRT.
Is there one?
The extra sites you're talking about, is it along the Eglinton Avenue LRT?
We will have a facility that was recently closed, Vaughan Road Academy. It's a former secondary school that's 800 or 900 meters from the Eglinton LRT. We have an underutilized facility, George Harvey Collegiate, which is closer to Keele. That is probably the same distance. Keele in Eglinton.
Sorry. So if
I'm speaking about facilities along the LRT.
You're actually suggesting that your solution to the senior school level is to have a school that's far outside of what's considered the walking distance from an LRT, because you're almost a kilometer north of Eglinton Avenue for one, and the other one is at Keele Street?
What I'm suggesting is that for secondary schools, we do have surplus capacity in the system, and we would look to utilize that capacity first before suggesting that new secondary schools are required.
And that's because of the provincial policy talking about surplus, or that's your thought that it's a good thing to do?
I would say both of those things. We are expected to be efficient users of our space, and that's something that the province has expressed to us, and it's something that we have adopted in terms of how we approach.
As far as elementary and middle schools, the plan that's here takes a population that was 60,000 to 90,000, and if approved with the additions to 100,000 persons. Do you have space in the local community for those elementary and middle school children?
We do not have space in the local community.
So how many schools would you have to build?
We require the expansion at Davisville. We require the much larger addition at Hodgson. On top of those two things, we estimate that another 800 elementary pupil places will be needed to serve the community over the long term. That could be one extremely large school or a series of smaller schools, satellite facilities.
I'm only,
That's the estimate.
and I'll do respect, Al, I'm trying to get a short answer, because you gave us the long one already, and I'm a simple-minded person.
We need 800 spaces.
Okay, and that's another school?
Right.
And you don't have a site?
We do not.
Do you have funding for the construction of the expansion of the other sites?
We have funding for the expansion of Davisville. We have a portion of the funds we need for the expansion of Hodgson. Beyond that, we do not have any funding.
So how much are you short to get Davisville and Hodgson built?
Davisville, we estimate that our funds are in place. Hodgson, we are approximately $12 to $13 million short, based on the options we're currently exploring.
And for the additional school that you require?
Well, we don't have land, so that's a huge consideration in the cost, but the
what I would call benchmark funding for a school of 800 pupil places is approximately $20 million.
With or without the land?
Without the land.
Okay, so you're going to continue, though, to have signs posted at all the new developments that say that there isn't space within the local schools, and the plan that's in place will not permit those to come down. Am I correct?
The signs will continue to be put up. What we've recently put forward and what our trustees have approved is redirecting or busing students from new developments outside of the area, and they will be accommodated, as you heard earlier, at a school south of here in Moore Park. It's Whitney Public School, and that will be to buy us some time until we can get a plan in place.
So I'm just trying to understand this comprehensively. So many of the residents and parents come here on the development applications, and in particular on these, and tell us, we want local schools, so in a high-density community like this, and this is much greater than most density areas anywhere in the city, if not across the province, they want local schools to walk to. Our staff have told us that you can't drive because it won't work, because the road capacity isn't there to really drive people out. They have to go by transit. I'm just trying to understand, is there a plan that you've put in front of the school board that has the necessary expansion that is waiting for provincial funding? Or is it that you're putting forward a plan that supports the busing and the movement of the kids and doesn't have it because you don't have the funding or because you don't support the expansion?
So I would say that at this point in time, the plan that was put in front of the board is an interim stopgap measure. It will be in place until such time as we do have an appropriate plan in place. We're going to be launching into a review this fall, looking at all of these factors, and that review will culminate in an accommodation strategy that takes into account all of the information that we now know through the Midtown in Focus exercise, and it will be something we put in front of our trustees and in front of the province that basically requests that funding be put in place for land and for buildings to allow us to accommodate the growth that's before us. So that's something we're embarking on in the fall. It will conclude in the spring.
Thank you. I have no other questions. I don't see my colleagues with them. Thank you for coming.
Thanks.
Clive Raymond, then Glenn Robinson.
Good afternoon, councillors.
You're Clive?
I'm Clive Raymond.
Is Glenn Robinson here? Great. And then after Glenn, I have Titania Kovaleva. Please go ahead.
I live at 70 Roehampton. I've lived in Toronto since 1966, mostly on Lonsdale Road. I went to Northern Secondary in 1967, so I'm quite familiar with that area. And I'll be very quick. Everything has been said, basically, that I was going to say. But what I will say is I see the Midtown area being the next Sao Paulo of Brazil, one, where crime is going to be rampant. The reason for that is as soon as you put tens of thousands of people that close together, there's a lack of respect. And I'll leave you with this. St. Jamestown, 1970s. We saw what happened there. The same thing will happen if we're not careful at Midtown. I believe there should be a moratorium on development, and if not, no higher than 15 stories. Thank you. That was quick.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions of the deputy? Thank you for coming. I have Glenn Robinson, and Titania Kovaleva, then Elena Matrichuk. Do you need to sit up for a minute?
Hello, my name is Glenn Robinson. I live at Yonge and Broadway, and I've lived in the neighborhood for about 18 years. And I'm just going to show a few pictures along Yonge Street. We had a photo tour a little bit further east, so I'll go out Yonge. So the first picture to show here is the When you come out of the subway, after you've been kind of squeezed in for a while, this is how crossing the street, crossing Eglinton from crossing Eglinton from the south side to the north side. Okay, it's extremely crowded, and a lot of people, times people are just about going into the cars. Now, this is definitely a result of the construction of the LRT, so it will get a little bit better when that's finished. But at the same time, when the LRT is opened, it's going to bring in thousands of people from the crosstown, so we're going to end up with the subway's going to be even in worse shape. I think one day there's going to be a riot at the subway station. This is trying to cross Yonge Street from the east side of Eglinton to the west side of Eglinton. And again, it's very difficult, and it's a mix of people and cars. This is a bit of an oasis in the neighborhood. There's actually still some low-standing buildings there. We have the Duke of Kent. Just outside of the picture here, there's a patio. So this is kind of a nice area that's still left. So it's kind of an oasis. Okay, now there's a few problems on the west side of Yonge Street, okay, which is in the Montgomery Square category area. We have walking north on the west side of Yonge, we have 2 consecutive blocks of construction. And here's a picture of Hellendale, which is right in the middle of the construction. This is looking west on Hellendale. Hellendale's been closed for as long as I can remember now. And, oh yeah, one more point about this. This picture here, this is looking at the old post office site. This used to be the only green space that we had in the area. We actually had green grass. We had people and their dogs laying out in the grass. So that grass has been taken away. The developers of this building said that they had told us that they were going to do the construction from the back so that we would be able to enjoy the park area while the building was being built. However, as soon as they started building it, they threw up fences and construction, and we had no access to the park for the past 3 years, even though we were told we would. This is the site of the old BMO building. Okay, that was a kind of a historic building. That's at Yonge and Roselawn. It's been in this shape now since for a year now, since that building the BMO was torn down. Here's another picture of it. My friend from New York said it looked like the South Bronx in the 80s. So it's just basically a few piles of rubble for the last year sitting there. This is a picture of the subsidized housing building that's across the street from where the Bank of Montreal was torn down. The people in this building, when the proposed building goes up on the Bank of Montreal site or just to the south of the Bank of Montreal site, their view of the sun and the sky is going to be completely obliterated. Yonge Street is a narrow street compared to Eglinton or other downtown streets. So when they have 14 floors in front of them, they won't only not be able to see sun, they won't even be able to see the sky. So that's kind of rough for people that live there. Here's another oasis. This is actually underneath the subsidized housing building. There's a fruit market, and there's a line of stores and shops and restaurants, and there's some patios out there. So that's kind of a nice spot. So what I'm asking is that for Yonge Montgomery Square area, I'm asking that...
Sorry, so I have to get you to sum up, sir.
Okay, we please review and visit the west side of Yonge Street as it affects our livability. It's a terrible place. It's getting worse. It cannot take more construction, at least till crosstown is finished. It's transitioning from 80% commercial And it was the anchor of the most desirable neighborhood in Toronto to 80% residential. This is a picture, another oasis, Yonge and between Broadway and Rohan, and option
I
3
know,
will
but
save this.
Thank you.
We'll save this corner. And finally, I just want to thank Councillor Robinson. I want to ask people to support option 3, and please revisit the west side of Yonge Street. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions? Not seeing any. Thank you again, Mr. Robinson. Titania Kovaleva, and then Elena Matvichuk. I'm getting close, I hope, to you, Titania.
No, I'm not actually, Councillor. On my list, I am actually next. If you have a different,
Okay,
my name's
but
Ornella Rikiki, so on this speaker's list, it's on here.
Okay, is Tatiana here? Because you might very well be next. Tatiana Kovaleva isn't here. I know, it goes by my list. And my list is given to me by the clerk, so I go by their list. No problem. Elena, is that,
Ornella.
pardon me?
I'm Ornella Rikiki.
Ornella.
Yeah. This is the list that was on the table over there when I came.
Okay, I don't have I need Tatiana, then I need Elena Matvichuk. Is Elena here? No. Well, I will make sure everybody gets a chance, but I'm going to go through the list as I have it. Is Elena here? Sorry, Elena Matvichuk. Then I have Andrew Mitchell. Elena, no Andrew. Bernadette Birnbaum. So that is the end of the list which I have, but they may have. Okay, and then Ornella Riccici. Now you're here. And that's the last person that I have on my list. So please, you 5 minutes. We're here to listen. If there's questions, we'll come back to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of committee. My name is Ornella Rikiki, and I'm Chief Development Officer with the Torgan Group. We own 2401 and 2409 Yonge Street, which are on the east side of Yonge Street and between Broadway and Erskine. As I've outlined them here, the blue being 2401 and the red being 2409. Our lawyers have previously submitted correspondence after the June 21st open house, so I will keep my comments very brief, especially since I'm the last person. We have been monitoring the evolution of this planning process, resulting in the secondary plan before committee. Torgan's issues or concerns relate to the proposed height in the secondary plan. Torgan, as I mentioned, we own 2401 and 2409, and when we purchased 2401 initially, we also at the same time owned the property which now is developed with TCHC. And we actually developed the TCHC building and sold it to the corporation as it is today. And we remain partners and share the underground parking facility between 2401, which is the medical building, and the TCHC building. The plan before you proposes maximum height of 8 stories along Yonge Street in this area. We support this, and we understand the importance of keeping the historic feel of this area of Yonge Street, as staff have indicated. I would like to direct my comments now specifically to 2409. As you can see on 2409, is unique in that it has a much more rectangle and longer depth lot. What we're looking for is allowing the rear half of 2409 for higher density which would be in keeping with some of the other heights in the block and provides a varying height and built form for the rear portion of the property. The redevelopment of 24-9 has been discussed with TCHC and have also discussed redevelopment options as well as the financial benefit that TCH will realize with the development of 2409. This property's unique lot size and location in the block lends itself to further consideration for increased height on the rear half of the property. Along with the relationship we share with TCHC and the potential financial benefit to them, we believe it should be relooked at. We are respectfully requesting that further consideration for increased heights should be given to 2409, and specifically the rear portion of 2409, in keeping, though, with the proposed option 3 plan that's before you today in terms of those types of heights. Given these unique characteristics, we believe that this is a feasible consideration for the property. Thank you. Answer any questions.
Are there any questions from my colleagues? If you can help me over here.
Okay, sure.
I was trying to find your property on the maps. Which map are you showing a designation of 8 stories on?
Okay. Yeah.
Of our schedules that we have?
Yeah. Oh, on your schedule? Yes. I have it here.
Because I know where Alley Cats is.
Yes. So I've highlighted it. It's the highlighted one right there.
You're upside down right now.
Yeah, I'm upside down. Yeah. The highlighted one there, that's 2409.
And you're looking for, that is, and what you're asking for is for the rear portion.
Correct. We understand the importance of keeping the 8 stories along that frontage where it's been defined in the secondary
Which
plan.
building is a TCHC building there?
TCHC is the one that has the number 7 and the asterisks on it.
So it's on the corner.
The corner is a small retail building, and then we own the property right beside it, but it's encompassed where that number 8 is. We have the medical office building there.
And the TCHC, now, the plan is to rebuild part of the TCHC building?
No, not at this time, no.
So what is the arrangement you have with TCHC?
We had initially discussed the potential redevelopment of a portion of TCHC for them to realize further density as well for Toronto housing. However, at this point in time, that's not something that's on their horizon. We have discussed with TCHC an increased underground parking facility, which they would be financially compensated for, and that is the existing structure we currently share with them that would be subject to a further expansion of whereby they would benefit from that.
So you don't have an agreement, and you're looking for a change for some time in the future?
Correct. Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
I have gone through the list of public speakers that I have. Is there anybody that's here that wished to speak that hasn't come forward yet, that I might have missed? So I don't see anybody that wants to come forward. We have then questions of staff, I guess, is what we'll do next. Are there any questions of staff by non-members of the committee?
Just want to confirm that option 3 conforms to the growth plan, the provincial policy statement, and the Planning Act.
Through the chair, based on our review of those 3 provincial plans and policies, it does conform.
It fully conforms, thank you. And then would option 3 reduce the shadow impacts on public open space compared to the other 2 options before us?
Through the chair, yes, based on some sun and shadow studies, it does reduce the shadow impacts on the northern collegiate Toronto Northern Toronto Collegiate Institute's open space, as well as on the Eglinton Junior open space.
Okay, thank you very much. So it would reduce shadow impacts more than any other motion, option 3. Option 3 also sounds like it would also reduce the urgent requirement for new schools in the area. Is that actually factual?
Through the chair, it is a reduction in the overall population. We did not discuss the total reduction with the Toronto District School Board. That's something we would have to confirm afterwards, and how many pupils would be required to be accommodated with it.
Okay, thank you. It looks like the ratio of jobs to residents for option 3 and option 1 is essentially the same. Can you confirm that's the case?
Through the chair, they are roughly the same. It's about a third. There is more jobs and employment that would get generated in options 1 and options 2. Part of that is based on the overall amount of gross floor area that would be permitted and the requirements that are in the plan for a certain percentage to be office, institutional, or cultural uses.
But you're saying it's not significant?
Through the chair, I'm not going to respond to that. You know, the issue of jobs in the area has been an issue that we've been dealing with and contending with in the area, so additional jobs does benefit the area.
No, that's not what I was saying. I completely agree with that. But my understanding is the ratio of jobs to residents for option 3 is not significantly off the other options.
Through the chair, no.
Okay, that's what I was getting at, because I fully agree with you on that, and I think the residents of the area do as well. I guess maybe this is a tough question, but how many units are already approved and awaiting construction in the Yonge Eglinton study area? Would you have that number?
Just a couple of seconds, and we should.
Okay, if you could just hold my time.
That's the residential population. I've got a table here. Through the chair, are you looking at the number of units, Councillor?
Yeah, the number of units already approved and awaiting construction, because there's a lot of signs in the area, and then there's a lot of about to, pull out the bulldozers and cranes.
So as of at the end of 2016, there was approximately 12,500 units within the urban growth center. There were an additional 10,225 units that were approved but not yet built. And the current number of applications that are under review in the urban growth center is about 3,500.
And do you know if that includes the buildings currently at the OMB?
Through the chair, yes, many of those would be applications that are currently before the LPAT.
So once those buildings that are currently at the OMB were approved, or are approved, one would assume they will be, given the OMB, how many more residents can we expect in the Yonge Eglinton area?
So the number of additional residents within the urban growth center with the applications that are currently under review would be about 5,400.
Okay. And a moratorium is something I've talked to Glenn Lentern's predecessor many times about over the last 4 years, and at council and at executive. Is that an option? Because that would be wonderful if that was the case. Given
through the chair, the city and any municipality currently doesn't have that power under the Planning Act, a pause or a moratorium. We do have holding powers under the Planning Act that we discussed earlier today, and this plan does include prescriptive policies for how we would use holding powers in Yonge and Eglinton on a case-by-case basis. And there are interim control powers that get used in a situation where a bylaw currently permits something that's problematic. So you put interim control in place to prevent that while you go and study whether or not you want to continue to permit that use. Other than those two powers, there is no such thing as a moratorium, and that would have to be, that kind of power would have to be requested as a change to the Planning Act.
Okay, thank you. And speaking of holding powers, I'd like to talk, if somebody from Toronto Water here could address holding tanks. And so my understanding is, nice segue, Robinson. So if Toronto Water could just speak to the issues of some of these buildings literally not being able to pump water up to the top, and some of these holding tanks. And my understanding is you're not a big fan of holding tanks and the problems around those.
Through you, Mr. Chair, there's a couple issues with respect to providing what are called private systems within the buildings. One relates to storage of water in order to provide proper fire protection. You may have holding tanks with booster pumps for dealing with fire suppression systems. There's also in some cases, submissions made to deal with holding sanitary or stormwater in order to deal with lack of sewer capacity. In those particular situations, we do have requirements for holding stormwater on site. That's part of the green standards. So we do require buildings to have stormwater containment. There are some applicants that make submissions asking us to approve systems where they hold sanitary flows and then discharge at enough hours. Those are the ones we typically deny, because at the end of the day, you want to make sure that you have sewer capacity to deal with those flows, because otherwise you really can't control when they release those flows. So we typically deny any sanitary holding tanks.
Okay, thank you very much.
So, Councillor, do you have other questioners? Did you still have a question?
I just had this is a very quick question. And the growth plan is for the avenues and for transit nodes. But is there anywhere in there that recognizes that putting that type of growth onto avenues and transit nodes where families are moving, that schools will actually be required, that you are moving families into those areas? Or is that silent and it's an overall prescription for the whole city?
Through the chair, I mean, the growth plan's emphasis for the region is to identify areas for growth, and in the City of Toronto that manifests itself in centres, as you point out, or avenues in the downtown. Certainly the connection that's made through policy to the provision of infrastructure to support that growth in those areas is a very relevant and significant part of the growth plan. The growth plan also, however, refers to complete communities and as a principal tenet of good planning. And so wherever those families and those children end up should be responsibly accommodated for through the planning that the school boards undertake in their various accommodation and their long-range planning for growth, whether that growth be demographic growth in neighborhoods or through new populations that come through our growth areas.
However, once the province took over all of the funding of school boards, they had no ability of their own to project, as they had in the past, and meet those types of growth needs. Would you agree with that?
Well, we've certainly, we have kind of separate but connected planning regimes, and we certainly coordinate as much as possible with the school board and provide them with our growth estimates and do planning exercises as we have with them in Yonge and Eglinton. But at the end of the day, they've got to approve accommodation plans, and then they've got to develop strategies to secure funding from their from the province to build new school infrastructure should the accommodation plan require new infrastructure.
So for a larger zone, I know we collect taxes for our own infrastructure. Is there any way to have a zone where you're collecting development charges from developers in a larger zone that's set out for growth for a school?
Well, to date, the funding tool that has been employed by the separate school board is through a DC to support growth-related infrastructure, but the public school board does not have a DC in place currently.
Could it have a DC in this zone?
It could pursue a DC.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor DiCiano, you had a question as well?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I've read over the letter by one of the local councillors, Councillor Matlow, with respect to his concerns of overdevelopment and perhaps asking the province to put a pause on development of the young Eglinton area. So, you know, asking is one thing, but having the province follow through on that, how would that work? And have you ever seen that happen before?
Through the chair, the city often advocates for legislative change with the province. We did that for over 10 or 15 years with the Ontario Municipal Board, and that's our recent experience. And certainly when the province changes the Planning Act every 5 or 10 years, the city oars in and comes forward with its opinions about how the planning process is working and what needs to be changed. So there are regular occasions and special occasions when the city advances requests to the province for legislative change. It's not unheard of.
Yeah, no, but specifically to pausing development, have we seen that happen before?
Not that I'm aware of, no. The request or
Yeah, you've never seen, have we made that? Well, I'm sure we've made that request before, but you're saying the province has
No,
never.
I don't believe we have, no.
Okay. Oh, okay. And you've never seen them pause development for reasons such as, you know, not being able to catch up with infrastructure and whatnot?
Not in my experience. It's certainly the unprecedented level of development that we're seeing in some areas of Toronto. It is a new experience for a lot of us, and you've heard from the community today about what they're experiencing. So it may be time for some new thinking, but to date, there has not been that kind of thinking.
Right. Thank you.
Councillor Perks has questions.
I'm just trying to make sure I've got my head around all of this. In the supplementary report, you brought us some options, and you developed those options in response to the direction from council or this committee at the last meeting. You were told to go do this, so this is what you brought us. Is that right?
That's correct. The committee requested that we host a further community meeting, which we did, and solicit feedback from the public on lowering building heights in specific character areas and ways that we might be able to increase employment opportunities.
Okay. The report that you brought, I've never seen anything quite like it from the planning department. You've given us options for how the development should go. I'm used to instead you guys giving me your advice as to what constitutes good planning. So what is your advice that we do here as planners?
What you have in front of you is the original staff report, which was the result of the city's city-led initiated official plan amendment review, the secondary plan for Yonge and Eglinton, with our draft official plan amendment and our analysis, comprehensive advice. The committee asked to consider, or have us consider, other options, which we've done and presented to you. And the committee also asked us to provide advice as to whether or not those options conform with the growth plan, and we provided that to you. So that's what you have in front of you is our original report and this report with options to consider.
Okay, so the planning advice I have is the original report. You've developed some options in response to a direction to you. What are the consequences for the city if we don't take the planning advice, but we instead take an option we told you to develop?
So that's something that Mr. Haley may wish to advise you of, and perhaps not in a public forum.
Pardon me?
Mr. Haley?
I didn't hear the last part of what you said.
Perhaps not in a public forum?
Yes. So certainly, Mr. Chairman, if there is discussion to be had in terms of implications, I would suggest we go in camera on it.
On what grounds?
Anticipation of litigation. You've heard a number of private sector solicitors indicate that there's possible challenges with respect to the Section 26 process.
Okay, then, Mr. Chair, I have no choice but to move that we go in camera.
So could we have a motion to go in camera? Yes, Councillor Campbell, you want to speak to the motion to go in camera?
I would like Councillor Perks to hear what I have to say. So I don't disagree with going in camera to discuss the issue, but if we're going to do it, I think we should do it at council and flush it out at council if it's a big issue, rather than just doing it here, because your concerns are going to be the same at council as they are here.
I can't vote on this without solicitor advice, here, now, today, in this committee. Sorry, we're deliberating as a body. That's how it works.
So, Councillor Perks, the reason, just a question on your motion, and I'll recognize you, Councillor Fillion. I think my colleagues are trying to be able to deal with this in an efficient manner without losing quorum. Are your questions going to be long in camera, or can we do it within the 5 minutes that you?
So I was just told, in response to a question I asked the chief planner, that if I want to understand what the consequences of selecting what's in the supplementary as opposed to the original advice are, that I need to get in-camera advice from the city solicitor. In other words, I've been told in order to understand what I'm about to vote on, I need his advice. How quickly he can give me his advice, I don't know.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Fillions, you wanted to speak on this?
The same as Councillor Perks, I can't vote on this without answers to questions which we're told would need to be done in camera. So I don't think there's any option about us going in camera. I think we are required to.
So there is a motion to go in camera. All in favor? I have to read it out properly. I have to do my job as the clerk tells me to. There's a motion to go in camera to consider a matter relating to litigation or potential litigation, including matters before administrative tribunals affecting the municipality or local board. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. To the members of the public, we have to get a little bit of advice without you hearing it, because it may have to do with legal matters, which is what I read out, or other challenges to our decision. So we are going to do that in private, and then we will come back to public session to finish deliberating on this. So I could ask everybody except for the staff involved to please leave the room, and we will get you back, and hopefully as shortly as possible. Okay, we are back in public. Are there any public questions of staff that remain? Not seeing any. Non-members of committee wish to speak? Not seeing any. No, you can't. No.
They want to take my spot.
Members of council.
I think
was
actually
teasing
they
my
would be more
colleague who-
articulate than I will be, so, okay, I'll be very brief because I understand you're having quorum challenges. So I just firstly want to thank all the residents who wrote letters, and I think there's well over 100, if not more, and all the residents that came out to speak today. They did a better job than I could ever do at articulating the experience of living in this neighborhood. I also want to thank city staff, particularly Cassidy and Paul. And also, I've renamed her Elsie, but she knows who she is. It's been amazing to see these guys work on this, and I know it's been a long and difficult process. I truly appreciate your efforts and your work, the way you've tried to work with the neighborhood. So thank you for that. It's been a long time coming, this secondary plan. Originally, it was about public realm. I encouraged the planners then, through a motion, to expand the scope to include the infrastructure piece. And unfortunately, as you've heard today repeatedly, this area, it's gone unchecked by both the city and the province for many years. And what we've seen is a bit of a Wild West environment for developers. So as you heard again, the Young Eglinton Centre exceeds the provincial minimum density targets of 400 residents and jobs combined per hectare prior to the growth plan even coming into effect in 2006. And of course, in 1991, there was already 450 residents per hectare. Today, over 600 residents and jobs combined per hectare. So it far exceeds the growth minimum targets for a transit station area, and I think that's very important of those of you who are proponents of density around transit station nodes. It far exceeds all of that over and over again. In fact, it's the most densely populated urban growth center in the greater Golden Horseshoe and ranks amongst the densest communities in Canada. So I'm going to cut out a lot of what I was going to say because it's all been said, as I said, very eloquently. I want to tell the committee about our meeting on June 21st. It was packed, standing room only, and 80% of those people who attended voted for option 3 or lower. A lot of people wanted lower than option 3. There was a lot of compromise, as I said earlier, between the planners and the working group that developed option 4 that became option 3. The planners went up to 20, it went up to 24, 26, 27, 29. So this is not exactly what the neighborhood wants, option 3, but it's the compromise. And it was influenced by both the planners and the residents. We want Yonge Street to be a main street. We want to feel like we're in Boston, and we don't want to be really a neighborhood of skyscrapers and wall-to-wall towers. And that is not a community that we want to live in. So we want to make sure that we move towards an option that also creates development, creates employment opportunity, but also without sacrificing livability. And that's really the #1 word here today is livability. We also have learned through this report that staff have created the supplementary report that the shadow impacts will be less with option 3, particularly on 2 important educational institutions. And we all know, I know Councillor Fillion more than others, knows the story of John Fisher. He heard about it repeatedly at North York Community Council, 35 stories going up where 8 to 10 should probably be going. Again, courtesy of the OMB and what those parents, 500 parents, did to really, I think, reform the OMB in the final stages because they fought so hard. And they're with us, they're behind us 100%, those John Fisher parents. But I won't go into all the great things about childcare and schools and what this would do for these overcrowded institutions. Instead, I will just say on page 13, it clearly says that option 3 conforms to the growth plan, consistent with the provincial policy statement, and has regard to the matters of provincial interest in Section 2 of the Planning Act. I can't say that enough. It is estimated this growth centre will exceed 1,000 residents and jobs per hectare for all options. Page 14 is the page if you want to look at it. So in wrapping up, I would say option 3 is a fair and reasonable plan. It's supported by the neighborhood, although, like I said, it's not their ideal plan. They would love to actually not see another unit go in this area till we can play catch up. And I'm a big proponent of a moratorium. Any pause that can happen, I'm behind, fist pumping. Having said that, we've been told that's not in the cards and that's not expected. So the best we can do is come up with an option. Greg Lentern, our chief planner, said to me, Jay, I need an option, I need a plan, and I respect that. And Carrie, like I said, Carrie and her group, I call her Elsie, but Carrie is her real name. I think she's tired of my phone calls and meetings, but they have been so professional and so helpful in this process. I can't say enough about their commitment to this. So I will wrap up by saying thank you to the members of this committee for your patience and your ongoing support, and I hope you will support the livability of this very dynamic neighborhood.
Thank you. I'm going to start it off because I'm going to place the motion that I have, which is from the previous meeting, along with, has option 3 in it. It's dealing with quite a number of the issues that are here. I circulated it to my colleagues. It's on their desk. It'll be something you can pick up in the public after the meeting because it'll go online. And to speak relatively briefly on this, and it's interesting that this is the last major item that this committee is dealing with, and one of the most difficult ones. And it's because of all the comments that we've heard from the public throughout, which is very important and appreciated here, that Yonge and Eglinton has already changed, and the approved plans for Yonge and Eglinton and many of the buildings that are approved and not yet built will continue to change it substantially. And there has not been a plan that has been followed in the area to this date. And the problem that many of us have had here on council in helping the community is the fact that so many of the applications that were approved in the area are subject to OMB appeals. While the OMB is gone, those approvals are not. And that's really what we're trying to deal with. This plan gives a little bit of relief on some of those applications that are there, but it won't change the ones that are approved. So we're trying to support the infrastructure needs as we can. We're trying to understand the community. And I would suggest that if this was 5 years ago and the planning staff were looking at it at that time before many of the applications that were approved by the board were in place, we might be looking at something different. I think they have done a tremendous job in their initial report in trying to deal and make recommendations to us in light of those decisions. But as I was taught my first day in council 27 years ago, departments write reports, committees, which is what we're doing, are making recommendations. At the end of the day, council will make a decision, but as this planning is in the province, our decision is not final. The provincial government makes the final decision. And if we make a decision that you support as the public, my recommendation would be to do your due diligence and try and make sure that the minister approves this as the city approves it and as you would like it, because that will most likely be the next battleground that this will have to stand a challenge of after council. So, I mean, thank you to everybody that's been involved. It's a lengthy motion, but tries to deal with all the issues we have, along with options 3 and reducing some height in other areas as well. And from there, I think Councillor Perks, you have a motion as well on behalf of our colleague.
On behalf of Councillor Matlow, I'm moving this motion, which effectively asks staff to put their thinking caps on and see if there's a plan B, which is to get the provincial government to put a stop to what's going on there until we can get our infrastructure in place. That may sound like a Hail Mary, but frankly, everything in front of us is kind of a Hail Mary. We're effectively using a tool that we almost never use, which is the Section 26 application, with planning advice that's of a nature that's not something I've ever seen before. because development is out of control there, and development's out of control there because the province of Ontario simply doesn't understand how what kind of tools municipalities need in order to be able to manage growth. I think we could be seeing the kinds of population increases we're seeing in the city of Toronto without having these few explosive areas like Yonge and Eglinton, like the core, like the eastern half of Liberty Village, and North York Centre, and some of the stuff that we've seen in the bottom of Etobicoke as well. And it's because, frankly, the province hasn't given us the room through their Growth Act to manage development the way we would want to. I wanted to note that in 2 months, it will be 50 years since I first attended John Fisher School. So this is something I care very deeply about. That I care very deeply about. It's the neighborhood, even though I live elsewhere, that I'm most feel at home in. And to the community, I would say this. Yonge and Eglinton is also interesting because it's I think the only place in the city of Toronto where you have an intersection of a new Democrat MPP, a liberal MPP, and a conservative MPP. All their ridings meet at that intersection. And all the advice that we have got from the planning department and this motion and what Councillor Shiner has done depends on you guys being able to scare the hell out of those three people so that they're all competing to give you the best outcome. And it will be a decision, this is what you're seeing us doing here is essentially saying to the new Minister of Municipal Affairs, there's this mess here, you have to step up and fix it. And I'm not completely confident about that. I don't think that this government is putting the issues of Midtown Toronto front and center on its agenda, but you can make that happen. It's up to you. Do it.
Go for it.
Thank you. Does anybody know the principal that was at the school 50 years ago so we can find out the type of student Councillor Burks was?
I was an awful student.
Councillor, I was 10 years away from being born.
So we have motions here. Did you want to speak, Councillor Fillion?
Briefly, but first, I just want to verify, so you have incorporated option 3 in your recommendations, is that correct?
Yes.
Yes, okay. So then I will speak quickly in favor of that, and obviously it's an area that is completely being overdeveloped, and unfortunately we need to go along with a certain level of that because of provincial policy, but we do not need to go beyond the provincial policy. So there you go.
Thank you. So we have which one first, Councillor? Oh. No. So the motion that I moved, can we have a recorded vote? All those in favor of the motion?
All those in favor of the motion before you, Councillor Campbell, Councillor Deschiano, Councillor Shiner, Councillor Fillion, Councillor Perks. That motion carries unanimously.
And then a motion from Councillor Perks. And there's an in-kind vote. There's an in-kind vote on the other one from the Councillor Robinson. And the other item, Councillor Perks' motion is up on the screen. All those in favor? Opposed? The item is amended. The item is amended. Well, recorded vote on the item is amended.
All those in favor of the item as amended, Councillor Campbell, Councillor Chiano, Councillor Shiner, Councillor Fillion, Councillor Perks. That motion carries
That's
unanimously.
carried. So members of committee, we have two quick votes. Can we put up the other two items?
So item, you want to go to item 2?
Item 2, Eastern Avenue. There is a motion here that my colleague, Councillor Fletcher, has worked with on staff. That's in front of us. I don't even know if she has to speak. I will move it on her behalf. I just have to make sure the clerk's is with us. I'm moving the motion on my colleague's behalf. All those in favor? Opposed? The item is amended. All those in favor? Opposed? And then we had 31.8, the study work program. There's a motion that I had staff draft with me. So I have two motions on that. I'm just waiting to get them up on the screen. In regards to the Heritage Conservation District, staff recommendations, which I'm moving. All those in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none. And the second motion?
Every term. You know what, for some reason.
All those in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. No other items, Madam Clerk? Again, thank you to everybody for the tremendous hard work and all the members of the committee. We are, for the very last time of this session, adjourned.
Wonderful job, Mr. Chair.